Hey, family, what's going on? What's going on? All right, let's see. Who do we have? We got Aerospike, what's up? All right, 78 Vita, what's going on? Cam to play, Aerospike, Azamel, I think I'm saying that right. Sherry, Truth Hurts. Who else? Well, we got Jeff already. Third day. Timothy Price, what's going on? Yahoo, what's going on with y'all? The realness. Family, what's going on? What's going on, y'all? Okay, we're gonna start with the introduction. Family, I want everybody to hit a one again if y'all remember Sunday seminary. Two, if you don't, because if you've never heard of this group, y'all done missed out on a treat. So, family, I have an awesome panel. I am so excited. Y'all don't realize how excited I am right now. I'm always go back. I started out with this entire panel. Plus one, y'all haven't seen in a long time, and a lot of people have been asking for this person. This is where I started out. Sunday seminary, my family, my home. And this is just something that I'm so excited about bringing them together. Everything y'all know about Sister E, these people imparted that into me. They taught me, they helped me, they molded me to be able to have the courage to do this. I didn't have the courage, didn't think I could do it, and these were the people that pushed me to say, speak your mind, sis, say what you got to say. So this is my family. This is still my family. So it's gonna be a good conversation. What we're gonna deal with is dealing with the church and racism and how the church deals with it. So I'll go ahead and start bringing everybody up. So my Catholic brother, what's going on?
What's up?
Guard.
What's up, sister? It's funny. You mentioned that word family, and I thought about how family is not necessarily confined to just blood and how long you know each other. Because I mean, we've only known each other for about what 2 years,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think we do feel like we feel like family. So I appreciate you saying that, and same on my end. I feel like family in this space.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Then y'all know Jerome. Jerome, he's usually in in the chat, but he used to be in a lot of our lives. He was a major part of the community because he gave us a comedic viewpoint when it came to certain subjects we had no idea about. So Jerome, come on, say something to the people.
Hey, I'm first of all, I want to say peace to the panel and peace to the chat. You know, uh, I'm honored to be on tonight. You know what I'm saying, and discuss this topic. And like Sister E said, I think with all of the different backgrounds that constitute Sunday seminary, we have been able to sharpen each other, and not only sharpen each other, but we've been there for each other for years, and we've loved each other. We never really parted ways, even when Sunday seminary, kind of took a hiatus. We still would keep in touch, and I'm actually glad for a reunion.
Yep, yep. And my bro Jeff, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Grace and peace. Good to be in the house again. It's been a while. Second time around on the reunion. The first time was very enlightening and very appreciative, very grateful. It's good to see everyone once again.
All right. And this is my sister, my mentor. Y'all don't realize how excited I am to have this woman of God up here. She was the only woman that was up here that could hold her own. And she had been on Sunday seminary a long time, for a little bit before I came. And when I met her, um she was one of those that could sit me down and say, Sister E, now you're doing the most. And when she would tell me I'm doing the most, I'd be like, yes, Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. But I want to bring her up. If y'all remember Sister D, love you. What's going on, Sister D? Can you hear me?
Hey, everybody. Hey, shalom, grace and peace. Please. Glad to be back with you. I'm sorry I've missed out on so much, but I'm blessed and favored to be here tonight with dear Sister E on her platform. My family, you're my fam. And each one of you know that, including, well, I ought to say, including the one not on the screen, but you know that you're family, and I'm just blessed to be here. It's an honor, and I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion.
Okay. This is gonna be interesting. I don't even know how to start this. Y'all ain't seen me smile like this in a long time. I'm so happy to see all of us. Me and God has been holding it down, y'all. Y'all been coming up missing on us. That's all I got.
Yeah.
Me and God has been holding it down. We had a good discussion. We're gonna revisit the last discussion we had, which is mental illness. But I wanted to talk about the decolonization of I don't want to say the church, because the church is very important to me and others. People don't say church, they say assembly, but you get what I'm saying. But the biggest thing is racism in the church, and how sometimes the black church, and I just want to use them for now, take a blind eye to racism. You got this whole thing of critical race theory. No one wants to talk about it. They don't want to talk about racism in the church. And what's interesting was a discussion I had on Brien's channel about 2 days ago. It got very heated because my problem is this: how are we supposed to be believers when we're not fighting for the oppressed or standing for the oppressed? Even though all of us got good, cushy jobs, doing well, but we still have to abide by a system that was built by our ancestors, and the country itself has not dealt with it. They say that they've apologized. Apologizing comes with reparation. The church will tell you quit talking about it. In some churches, not all, or let it go, or that's in the past, or God forgives all sin. I've heard that, and I'm just like, first you got to repent for it to be able to receive forgiveness. And when you still walk in an unrepentant state where you're ignoring what's happening, how are we supposed to walk in this? So I wanted to bring y'all up to kind of get an idea of what your thought patterns are, because again, this whole critical race theory conversation, and don't bring social justice into the pulpit when it doesn't make sense, because Christ fought for the oppressed. So I just want to see what y'all views are. We can get started. Hello.
Okay.
Oh,
So, anyone in particular?
Oh, we could just talk about what's going on in the pulpit. Why does it seem like that the black church is just taking us? It's like it I guess it stems from this exodus. Let's start there. The exodus out of the church, because I believe some of that is stemming from the mass exodus out of the church, because a lot of black believers are tired of people taking, closing their ears to, like, racism doesn't exist anymore. And when you literally see a man choked in the middle of the street in front of the world to see, it lets you know that it's still prevalent. So what are y'all's thoughts about this mass exodus? Do y'all think it's tied to that?
Mm, somewhat. I think there's, as far as the numbers declining in the church, I think there are a number of things that's involved with that. Some of it is just really has a lot to do with the change in leadership, how leadership was in the beginning and the establishment of the church versus how it looks now. Leadership plays a key part in the church as far as the growth of it, and how things are, I guess you could say, produced. The individuals are produced or matured in the church. So I would say that is one factor, but I believe one of the sources of it is just the variety of mindsets that many leaders in churches have when it comes to colonization.
Mm-hmm.
Some people believe that colonization does not exist anymore, um, in the degree where it's not intertwined in church doctrine. But for those that do believe it, I don't think we voice it enough. Not speaking against it in a sense, but speaking to correct certain things that is being constantly taught that has a lot to do with uh, colonization or a certain mindset when it comes to biblical doctrine. So that's kind of where my field is on it. But you also have several other issues that you involve with it. When it comes to an individual, their purpose in church. A lot of people don't come to church to establish to look at anything involving colonization or a certain influence of cultures. Say, for example, and I just use this as an example that's very well known from a European perspective as far as the teachings in the church. Um, a lot of people don't agree with it because what we usually see as far as theologians, for example, when we go to seminary schools, when it comes to being funded in churches, uh, you usually see the, the European churches that are financially strong, that has more influential theologians or people that can actually teach and dissect the Bible. You also see reading resources that ties in with people that are Europeans. So, but on the other hand, you are seeing more people teaching that that are non-European, such as Dr. Vince Bantu. He explains a little bit a few things around centered around how things look from other parts of the world. Um, there's another gentleman. He's also a well-known. What's his name? Right off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember it. Doctor. His specialty is in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Um, I forgot his name. Forgive me for that. I think maybe Dominique something. But
yeah, that's his name. I think that's his name.
Okay, and he's here in the California area, maybe in Pasadena. He gives his position on certain things as far as, how often do you run across a black theologian that's expertise has expertise in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Then you have individuals like Lisa Fields with Jude 3 Project that talks about a variety of things, and she brings a plethora of different black theologians onto her platform, and this is one of her main topics. So you do have a variety of individuals that are coming up and creating dialogue, but it simply is not enough because when you hit home, you don't see a lot of these teachings actually being implemented in various churches that we go to.
Yep.
Jamal Dominique Hopkins.
Yes, that's his name.
I gotta check him out. So so I'm gonna play this video real quick so I can at least get it started, get it jumping, because I saw a little bit of it, so I'm hoping that it doesn't go too far off, but it does. And this isn't somebody that look like us, but he addresses a few things, so we can listen.
How about the horrible scandal of closed door churches? Churches whose doors are not open aggressively to everyone. I did my own little survey. I asked 6 men of God. If I gave them the names, you'd know every one. Well-known men. I said, tell me the truth. Don't lie to me. I want to know your feeling on this. How many ministers, how many pastors when on Saturday night they're hopefully praying for their message on Sunday morning and praying for the services and praying that God will bless? How many ministers do you believe can pray this way and mean it from their heart? Dear God, I know that you died for everyone in my community. I know you suffered and bled for every human being walking outside the Brooklyn Tabernacle. So, Lord, tomorrow I pray in the name of Jesus, by the power of the Spirit, draw them in. Black, white, brown, yellow, red, homeless, poor. Bring them in. We will love them. We will be your hand extended to them. We will nurse them. We will bless them. We will weep over them. But send them in, oh God, in Jesus' name. The high number that I got from any of these ministers I talked to, the high number was 5%. They said, oh no. Then we got these church growth characters talking about target groups. Everyone knows what that's a code word for. Come on. Just like the church growth principle, homogeneous churches grow faster. Everyone knows what that means. If you have any brains in your head, it's keep the blacks and the poor people out. I talk to well-known ministers who write books that you read, who told me, if I follow what you're saying, Jim, half my church will get up and leave. So here's what I'm saying. What kind of church do you have? That human beings that Christ died for, they come in and your people are going to leave? Don't tell me how much you teach them the Bible and how good they are at coming to church on Sunday and serve the body. They don't love other human beings that Christ died for. That's Christianity. But we're so used to this, it doesn't even shock us. I can tell by your reaction. It doesn't even shock us. We're used to it. Racism is so embedded in cultural Christianity that we're not even shocked by it.
I'm sorry, y'all. Hold on.
And we record. But this is the greatest sin. Pornography slays their thousands. Prayerlessness, lack of study of the Bible, fanaticism, emotionalism. I'm against all of that stuff. I'm right with you. But come on, brothers and sisters, God is love. Listen to this. The angels must weep. They know what Christ did for all humanity. And here are Christian churches that are less integrated than the world. They're less integrated than the world. In New York City, people do crack cocaine interracially. They go to jail interracially. They go to Madison Square Garden to see the Knicks play, Yankee Stadium to see the Yankees. Mariano Rivera, the relief pitcher for the Yankees, has become a dear friend of mine. He's a wonderful Christian. He's going to become a preacher the minute he gets through with his baseball career. He's asked me to help disciple him. He told me one time, he's a poor kid from Panama. He said to me, Pastor, the Yankees are more accepting than the church. They're not even Christians. But nobody cares what color you are to the Yankees. The only one question they have is, can you play? If you can play, we don't care if you're purple, you're on our team. Not the church. What Martin Luther King said is still true. And let's not fudge around it with some spiritual talk about it's cultural, and you have to understand it's a lack of love. And here's my question. We talk about God coming. Coming for what? Why would he come if you don't want the people in that he died for? I'll prophesy. He cannot come. He cannot come. Any place that rejects the people he died for, impossible. The Holy Spirit would have to deny his own loving nature.
1 in 8. That's how many children die in Somalia before their 5th birthday. At just 2 years old.
All right. So the whole point with that was, and I know people into just going off, but what I noticed is he called out the racism that's so embedded in the church that it is literally carried over. And I don't want to say the black churches.
At just 2 years old.
It's not a, so the whole point with that was, okay. So the whole point with that was, what are y'all's thoughts? I'm gonna be quiet. What are y'all thoughts about what he said?
Well, I mean, you know me, I belong to the biggest racist institutional organization in the world, which is the Roman Catholic Church. And in regards to when I look at it from a Catholic lens, everything he says is true in regards to, white churches over here, black churches over here, Latino churches over here. And then even in the white sectors, you got the Lithuanians, you got the Irish, You got the Italians, and I live in Chicago, and I always say that Chicago is the most segregated city in the country. Many people might argue that, but from a Chicago experience, you got a couple of neighborhoods where it's just completely white, and then across the tracks is completely black. So I look at it from the Chicago experience when I say that. But going back to in particular the Catholic Church, when you're talking about the congregations and how the archdiocese or how these archdioceses deal with this, certain segments, certain populations, of the faith. And here in Chicago, we're going through a restructuring, as they call it, Renew My Church. They're going through a restructuring where the most devastated, they're closing these parishes, and majority of the parishes they're closing are Black and brown parishes.
Wow.
And so when you're talking about, this connects to that mass exodus that you're talking about, because many of the people who I talk to who have these closed parishes, some of them don't go to other churches. They just leave totally because it leaves a sour taste in their mouth when you talk about that. And speaking of which, I saw something, because they don't want to deal with racism, even though they're practicing it in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
And you even got the bishops who are, last year they were all, we're for the George Floyd, we stand for George Floyd and all this other kind of crazy stuff. But now we got this bishop in Los Angeles. I think he's the Archbishop of the Los Angeles diocese, Jose Gomez. Brother Jeff should know who he is. You in Los Angeles, right? Okay, all right.
Yes, I'm not familiar with your sect.
Okay, so he was in Spain just recently talking about how the social justice conversation is Marxist, and it's something what he called it a pseudo religion. So anybody who speaks out against social justice is a pseudo religion. Now, mind you, this guy is the president of the United States Catholic Bishops. This guy and the collection of United States Catholic bishops had wrote some treatise on racism and how they were quote unquote against it. And I think they did it in 2018. And if you read it, it was soft, it was watery.
Wow.
Many Black Catholics were like, first of all, we don't know what the hell you're talking about. Secondly, you guys ain't even serious about, solving this problem of racism.
Yep.
And so many of us, we like, you can do whatever, But this guy, like I said, Bishop Gomez is the president of the United States Catholic Bishops Conference. And last year he was all talking about, we stand for George Floyd, and he's for undocumented immigrants and all this other kind of social justice stuff that he's speaking up against. So how are you going to talk about all of this stuff last year, and then you go over to Spain saying that social justice is some sort of pseudo religion and it's Marxist?
Yes.
So the Catholic Church is an institution just talking out the back of what. And so, when I deal with this, being a person in the Catholic Church, and some people might say, and they might be correct, that I may have one foot out. but I mean, but that is the dynamics that we have to go through as Black Catholics, because when we see this stuff, it's like, and I ask myself the same question: why am I participating in this faith? Well, first of all, for me, it's like, it's like me being a United States citizen. You know what this country has done to our ancestors and us, but we still continue to be U.S. citizens because of the fact that we built this country.
Yep.
Our ancestors built this country. So we have a right to be here just like everybody else in this country. And I say the same thing for the Catholic Church, because when you look at the history of the Catholic Church, it was built by non-white people, mainly black folks. But then you had the Europeans who came in and basically took over the whole thing and then moved the headquarters to, Italy. So then at that point, that's when you got the whitenization of the church. So we all face this issue of racism, especially when it comes to the Catholic Church, which is greatly magnified because of the fact that it is a global organization, a racist global organization at that. But I'm pretty sure other denominations face the same issue, maybe on a local level, maybe on a national level. It's reflective of what society is today.
Correct. I agree. I'll leave the floor open for anyone else. Hey, Blacktastic. Y'all remember Blacktastic used to rock with us.
Yes, sir. What's up, brother?
Hey, what's up?
Hello. I see these wonderful black faces on there. Oh, I see Sister D, the matriarch is here.
Oh,
Oh,
good to see you, my brother, again.
good to see you. Good to see
God
you.
bless you. Grace and peace.
I'm so glad. I feel extremely blessed and honored to be here. My brother Jeff. We got you. When you say Father G, you can't just say Father. You gotta say Father G. That's Father G, right? That's Father G. Father G. That's how I say it. See Jerome hanging out. I see. All right. So I'm blessed to be here. Good to be with you all. So I'm catching up on what was being discussed about. Sister E and I had talked in brief. So I'm just listening for right now.
We're talking about the Black church and how it, not necessarily just the Black church, but the overall church organization, how it handles racism. We've been going back and forth about this because that last heated discussion I got in dealing with racism in the church, I have been.
Yeah.
Sister E, I'm gonna say a little bit in regards of you did get a little bit too heated. I have to say that much, but it had its reasons behind it. When you look at a bunch, several leaders that has been around for a long, they're seasoned individuals like me. They may be in their 40s, 50s, maybe one of them was even 60 years old, and to hear the conversation goes, well, you just need to pray, or that actually doesn't exist, or you say something in regards to how you respond to a person's daughter. Oh, that's ridiculous, just by the fact that you schooling her how to put her hands on the steering wheel to make sure the police see your hands. When you're dealing with circumstances like that, it's obvious when you have a pastor that teaches a group of people that what comes out of your mouth, you introducing things to them that this is just my opinion, and I'm not asking you guys to agree with me. In my opinion, you teaching them something that's not realistic, because there is a fact that not long ago I had guns pulled on me in my work truck. So it's not impossible. It happens, so and this was by the police, and so it lets me know that it's still real. Even in my 50s, I still have to deal with those circumstances. Put your hands on the steering wheel, open the door from the outside, walk to us backwards with your hands away from your body type of situations, which the gun's drawn. And I have a work truck that represents who I work for, and I have a city, I have so much information that indicates who I work for. How do you get around just pull me over? Don't pull a gun on me. but this is what your choice was. So, in relations to the church, and I'm not trying to go off on this thing, in relations to the church, when you're teaching individuals with a mindset like we saw on our brother Berean's channel, it's really hard to swallow that, because you still teaching a perspective that doesn't line up with the Spirit of God, and you got individuals that still teach that, like our brother, what's his name, Aaron Johnson. Now, we never agreed when it comes to social justice and the church. You still have individuals that believe that social justice has no room in the church. Well, you have individuals from biblical times fought and represented themselves in a form of social justice, but it's not talked about in the church, even though we know places like Atlanta and Memphis and other places built a platform to fight against social justice that was formed in the church. So we could march and protest and have schools and have rights to votes and all of this stuff. And we did that because we prayed and God led us into doing this, because we were the citizens that built this country, and we built our families up on biblical principles, so we can stand up as citizens, on that did well in society, that we felt like we had the right to speak up on things that wasn't fair and just, no different than what they did in the Bible. We see it, the Old Testament and New Testament, being spoke up on. So what's the difference between the two? That's one point. But then you have theologians that has really dissected the Bible, went through the disciplines, and still it's easily seen that a lot of the theology that you're learning from is from a Western persuasion. But you have, so for example, an African background. So why not take an incentive to learn something from where your origin is? Say, for example, utilize the history of the Coptic Church. That history is older than the Western's theology.
It is.
So why not use that as more of a template on how to practice it and have practical application in biblical studies? What's wrong with that?
Yep. That's key. Anybody got? I'm not gonna jump in. I'm gonna let everybody add they 2 cents, because it makes sense. When I got up there, that's all I heard was, just let it go, Sister E. You're hurt by slavery. You're scarred. You're wounded. You need to pray that God heals you. And I'm sitting there like, no, this world has done a horrible thing, especially here, to the Black community. And for me to sit here and act like that they taught us the Bible in the way they wanted us to understand it. They considered us to be beasts. When you look at some of these different doctrines and belief systems, that you want me to sit here and have a kumbaya moment. When we say God is judging sin, he's judging sin. And there was a sin that was done to my people that y'all just want me to take a blind eye to and just be like, oh, let it go. He's not going to let it go. But I am going to correct them and let them know that it was wrong. And a lot of it has to do with some of the teaching, some of the mentality of this country, and it's filtered into, and it's in the church. You know, the mindset of the slave Bible, the whole teaching of, obey your master. And they took scriptures to attack the Black community. And not to mention, they changed the entire image of Christ and made it seem like they were like Christ and we were beasts of the field. So I have a problem with that. And they looked at me like I wasn't this calm. I was going off because I'm sitting here and I kind of lost it, Sister D. I lost it a little bit, just a little bit. I pulled it back though, because it's just sitting there and I'm looking at Black believers sitting and checking me because I'm talking about the sin of this nation and how the church is taking a blind eye to it. And you telling me to be quiet. I can't do it. I can't. when you and they said, well, racism, the way you're looking at racism in so many words, and tell me if I'm wrong, Jeff, because you was listening. They were literally like saying it's I ain't gonna say it's not as bad, but things are somewhat better. And that's when I really lost it, because I said, tell me how things are getting better. That a year and a half ago, we watched a man on TV get choked to death. And people are still debating if this was his fault or the police officer's fault. A man is in his house by himself. A white police officer goes into his house and kills him. And they want us to have sympathy for her. And you telling me things have gotten better? So that's why I love Sister D.
All right. May I say something? Yes. I'd like to roll back to what Father G had said earlier, and then pull it into what Brother Jeff said. Father G mentioned about Bishop Gomez going over to Spain and calling social justice pseudo religion. Well, let's think about this. Who was one of the first colonizers in Africa and here? North America, South America, Spain. So you will go over to Spain and you're going to now have them thinking, oh, it's a pseudo religion, wherein you do have Black Madonnas over there, I believe. There are Black Madonnas in Spain. The irony of it. You see how contradictory this is? But you're going to call social justice pseudo religion because you're talking to the descendants of the colonizer. All right. Now we come on over. What I've been doing over the past year is digging a little bit more into my Bantu spirituality, into my African roots, digging more into that. Yes, I'm a believer in Yahushua, Yeshua, Yahweh, whoever you want to call him, except Jesus. But he is Jesus, because I know who he is. And I know the Jesus who does indeed answer prayer, who is the beginning, who is the end, who is the Son of God. Now I know him, right? But in my studying of African roots, because we all were born in Africa. All of mankind was born in Africa, on the continent. So that's our motherland indeed. But we that are melanated, Black and brown people especially, we have a special right to the motherland and to all of the benefits and the inheritance. This is something that God gave us, not any human being. It came straight from God, because when Adam was created in the very beginning from red dirt, Adam means red dirt, Father created him in his image. Let us make man in our image. And the us, we can get into that later on, because that's another discussion on who the us really is. But when you make Adam in his image, what are you telling me? I'm in the image of God. So then let's get this straight. People who do not have the melanated inheritance, the genetic makeup that we of African descent have, they're going to be feeling disadvantaged. I'm so sorry. They are disadvantaged. They are grafted in. They're the ones who had to be adopted into the family. I mean, I'm sorry, but it is what it is. And so when we come back over to the continent, and I've been reviewing about the Roman Catholic Church and its impact in Central Africa, Democratic Republic of Congo, where a lot of my roots come from, Cameroon, Central Africa, okay? And when you realize what was done over there, as well as what we are experiencing here in Florida, in Louisiana, in the Louisiana Purchase and all of that, with and here in America, and Mexico, Texas. I'm in Texas. Come on. The whole impact of the colonizer and utilizing, yes, scripture, and utilizing the threat that you must be Christianized, you must be converted in order to be protected. And what do? You send all of the children off into those islands on the Cape. off of Africa. And then they are groomed to become slaves. Then you're going to bring over the transatlantic, which I'm sure many people aren't watching right now know far more than I do. But then that's when your transatlantic slave voyages come in to South America primarily. South America, Spanish, Portuguese, Catholic. Okay, so and I'm pointing that up because Father G was the first one to bring up the Roman Catholic Church. I want to bring it later on if we get around to that, because I would like to talk also about the impact of Catholicism on our educational institutions and the Georgetown University type of situation where there are supposedly reparations being made. I want to bring in a personal experience later on if we get the opportunity.
Yes. You said Georgetown, and I am 45 minutes from Georgetown now. That's interesting. Yes. So, I mean, you brought up great points when you talk about, and I know everybody else want to chime in because Yeshaya looks like he ready to just jump in right now. Blacktastic. So come on, I know you got something.
Well, again, Shabbat Shalom, beloved. Good to see everybody. I'm still listening, but I do agree with what I've heard, because it's the fingerprint of the Eurocentric church on slavery, and not just only our oppression, but globally. Between the United States and Great Britain, they have literally colonized, invaded, or conquered 95% of the inhabited land masses. Now think about that, just between those two countries. And I always say that America is just the bastard child of Great Britain. And then Great Britain is the bastard child of the Roman system, which lasted for a millennia, and then broke apart into, you had the Holy Roman Empire, and then it was the first governmental system that became a world empire that incorporated both government and religion, and they weaponized religion. You have to think about this. They weaponized religion to the point where it wasn't really about conversion and spreading the gospel. It was about mental domination under a particular philosophy or doctrine, after taking the original text from the people to whom it was once delivered and then perverting it to make it work for them. If you study the history of European countries, you see this is something that's not unusual for them, because they've co-opted every culture they've ever come in contact with, and then incorporated that into their own culture, assimilated that, reworked or reverse engineered, or however you want to call it, and then use that for their own purposes. And you see it most evident in the colonization of the world. Every invention that other cultures used to further advance the culture for the good, European culture took it and reworked it to enable themselves to colonize those cultures. The Chinese invent gunpowder. Europeans go there and they say, let's take this gunpowder and make better and bigger guns. And so they experiment on each other. This is the nature of European history. We're going to fight each other and see how well these things work. Once we get all of that out of our system, then we're going to use it on other people. So they're experts in brutality. The Romans are known as the masters of warfare because they taught everybody else that they conquered, exactly how to do things. And you see those seeds planted in the system that was created. So everything that we see come out of there and then, has been used in some way to afflict and oppress other people. And this is why I say that racism is not an superiority complex, it's an inferiority complex, because those who feel threatened by those they perceive as greater now do the greatest brutality to those people to oppress them and afflict them in order to build themselves up and to make themselves feel superior to them, when in truth, they're doing all of that because they're inferior. How do you bring civilization to people and you're not acting civil? You don't bring civilization to people who already had civilization for thousands of years and you introduce savagery. Civilization means to act civil. They didn't come with an olive branch and doves. They came with guns and swords and spears. And after they came with that stuff and they subdued the people, then they psychologically terrorized them by taking what they took from them in terms of the scriptures, and they afflicted them so bad, they made the people hate what God originally gave to them. And that's why we have so many of our brothers and sisters now who don't want to read the Bible, don't want to turn to the Most High, and don't want to believe, because the oppressor used what was given to your ancestors against you and made you hate what actually belongs to you. And we see that it's and the psychology of it lasts longer than the physical brutality, because after you stop taking the beatings, in slavery, you're still taking the beatings without being on the plantation. We are still messed up in our minds because the beating didn't stop. They just replaced the instrument of our subjugation with different things.
And you know what? The thing is, they use religion to the religious mindset to subdue us. Because I noticed in the conversation when I was on a panel, it was love thy neighbor. You're misusing and abusing that scripture. It's not meant to say kiss my oppressor as he's beating me. No, it does not. And they love to use things like that. And I said, I was listening to him and I said, this is the slave master's mentality when it comes to Christianity. And it's in the Black, not all, but some Black churches. And these very leaders that we're having these discussions with looking at me crazy because I'm saying this is wrong. God has to judge this, and he's going to judge it. Oh, you want to see people? Yes, I want him to judge sin. Yes. Yes, I said, tell the people that had to endure slavery for over 200 years. Tell the children that were separated from their parents because the slave master decided to sell them. I think the thing that brought tears to my eyes here recently, because me, I'm the type of person, I internalize things, and I for some reason when someone tells me a story, I can always put myself in it. So a while back, I was talking to Pastor Kelly about New Year's Eve when I talked to him about this. We talked about Watch Me service and the story behind Watch Me service. And I knew it, but it didn't impact me the way it did that day. And he said, we were talking, and he said, Watch Me service was put in place because slaves were coming together to celebrate and worship God, because that may be the last time they see their family member. Because going into the New Year's, they would reset their books, and whatever they needed to keep, they would keep, and whatever slaves they needed to sell, they would sell. So that may be the last time that mother would see her daughter again. I don't know what happened to me or what came over me. I just burst into tears because I visualized, I said, me and my daughter in church. This is the faith of our people, though. They never attack God. They praise God in the midst of their turmoil. But I sat there and I said, if that was my child sitting next to me and I'm hugging her and I know the next day she might be gone. But these are the same ones that will tell us that would read the Bible to us when they started reading it. Or they would tell us that, what do they call it? The destiny. What is it? Me and you talked about it yesterday. Manifest. What is it?
Manifest destiny. That was the slogan by which they conquered the world. God wills it. This is what the Crusaders said when they went to the Holy Land, and they slaughtered more Christians than they did Muslims because it was a political thing. It wasn't a spiritual thing. They killed anyone who was a believer that didn't line up with the Pope or the Bishop of Rome, as it was sometimes called, and they killed any Jews who they felt were the enemies of the cross of Christ, as well as Muslims. But they were more brutal than the Muslims who already were ruling the land. Under people like Saladin, people were living relatively in peace. But once the Crusaders came and they started saying what would become the slogan for Manifest Destiny, God wills it, they did all the brutality and things that they did, because they believed it was their divine right, and therefore, through practices such as the selling of indulgences and other things, it was sanctioned by God. You could murder, you could rape, you could rob, you could burn people to death because God willed it.
Wow.
These people were considered to be so vile in the eyes of the Crusaders and as preached by the clergy in European churches that these atrocities were sanctioned by God. And so this is the means by which they did these things, and so it was a fanatical type of thing that they were doing. That it was a complete perversion of scripture, and we still see this, manifest in our day. The whole reason, if you just look at every treaty made by a European nation with another country has been broken. Every treaty they made in Africa, broken. Every treaty they made in Asia, broken. Every treaty they made with Native Americans, broken.
Yep.
Every treaty.
Yep. And when you look at that, we're not gonna even just say just the Catholic Church. The Reformed Church as well was just as racist.
Mm-hmm.
Their Reformed theology is steeped in racism, and a lot of their ways, as far as their mindset. Especially now the ones that I've come in contact with. And then what throws me off is the Black Reform community. It's almost they protect them. And it's like, you realize that we're still dealing with an unrepentant mindset of the church that does not want to deal with the atrocities that have been inflicted upon the Black community.
Well, why I believe God willed it.
Okay. Man.
Yeah, that's twisted.
Man. And you ask why people are leaving. You ask yourself why people are leaving. Why is there a mass exodus out of the Black church?
Well, if I could add my 2 cents to the discussion, one thing that I realized on a more global scale. Well, let's start with America first. Like, America asserts itself and presents itself as like the hub of Christianity, and they present themselves as a Christian nation, quote unquote, which we know that, come on, man, they weren't established on one relatively Christian principle. You know what I'm saying? Like y'all said, manifest destiny, the annexation of this country from the Native Americans and the slaughtering of a lot of the Native Americans. Then on top of that, they went to Africa, stole our ancestors, brought them over here and forced them to labor, because according to them, like y'all said, they said God willed it, but we know that there's no scripture to support that. That's not even, that's not even a biblical concept to do anything like that. But even more than that is the fact that over here in the West, they deem any, even down to the expressions, they deem any expression of Christianity that does not line up with the Western mindset as inferior. They try to demonize it, and it's like the West was like literally the last place, the West was like the last place to receive the gospel, to know anything about the gospel. But you had African people who had already known about Christ and the Bible long before any European ever got it. So how can y'all turn around and try to demonize cultures and expressions in regards to Christianity that actually predate any cultural expression of Christianity that came out of the West? And that's one of my biggest problems with the Western expression of Christianity. Is almost arrogant, and then on top of that, it augments white supremacy. So it's a lot of stuff that we have to repudiate as believers who are people of color when it comes to living over here in the West. It's like we gotta weed out a lot of the things that we were previously taught, and we have to look out for even subtle forms of racism in the church. So that's my 2 cents, man. But it's a lot more than that. But that's my 2 cents.
Floor is open. Everybody quiet?
It's like double dutch, the rope turning.
I'm running.
Got you on mute. Oh.
Yes, I'm off mute now. I'm talking, but I'm on mute. My apologies. So my question is to myself often is, what does my contribution look like to individuals that look like me, have with the understanding I have about Christianity and the church? So that's my question, and a lot of times it's really difficult to come out with the answers that I'm satisfied with. One is sharing the information that I do have. Two is often I have a desire to travel in places that has not been influenced as much, like places like Ethiopia, just to take out some time and study to see what it looks like from their perspective, being the oldest church recorded in history. As a contribution, what I do in the process is, as I learn, I teach. Especially when it comes to my children, I make sure that information that I receive is passed down to them. Like Sister D mentioned, historically about where we come from as an origin, all people, but especially people that's melanated, that has a special place on the continent of Africa. We have a special belonging there. We have a special connection there. I make sure that my children know that information, to the extent that I make sure that the research is done as adequate as possible. And so those are my contributions. So when it comes to learning, giving information out, practical application as far as how do we give information to one another that is not so colonized, well, I would say that we have to be a part of certain cultures that existed prior to colonizations. Do that, and then learn about that and be open to learn about it, such as going to travel to Africa and really get engaged in how we practice things before colonization. Without that, it's really difficult to get a real grasp of what we look like prior to that. Our biblical studies have been made possible through technology for us to be able to learn as much as we've been able to learn over the years. We don't have to spend gobs of money for books and information, and education is right at our fingertips. So we have to take advantage of opportunities that we have in order to enhance our learning in efforts to change how the church looks. But the way the church look now, you have large numbers of individuals leaving the church for various reasons, as we started the conversation. But can we get down to the core of why are they leaving? Is it watered down? Are the sermons so watered down to where the younger people don't hear it or can't connect? Or is it that the people are so mean that they can't tolerate, new members can't tolerate how the older members conduct themselves? Maybe it doesn't look like how, maybe the church doesn't look like how the church looked in the Bible. That's something to look at. How did the church look in the Bible practice in relevant to how we live our lives today? Because this is the church. This is our modern church. every individual on this channel and everyone that's listening, this is our church. I don't think anybody biblically could see this process, but we're sitting here having church. How can we be practical and give out information that's relevant to what we living now, that would enhance the learning of individuals, that would allow us to be the brothers and sisters that we learned to be just over what last couple of years now, Sister E. So we broke bread with one another, and through the Holy Spirit,
Yep.
we bonded. We had something very unique in this, nothing that we anticipated.
Yep.
We just came with an open mind and had a desire to pick up information. Who knows what we would do with it next? But we were searching out scripture, and that's what we were looking at. And so we had a desire to pick up on information, and that bonded us through the process. And I would say, for those that are listening, do something similar. Don't restrict yourself to learning and breaking bread with brothers and sisters, because colonization is real. But the information that we are actually able to obtain is real too. We can go really in depth on how people practice before Christianity, and plane tickets aren't far distance as they used to be. Now we can actually go to places and learn information, and so we can come back and feed other individuals that help us. I mean, that so we can come back and help and set things up for generations following us. And I don't mean to hog up all the time, but I'm just saying these are contributions that I often think about, because of the fact that we are hurting churches. Large numbers are leaving. I'm one personally that has not been in church for some period of time. And I am an elder, I'm an ordained elder, and I have not attended church for a long time. And I have my own personal reasons why. And I mean, if the panel wanted me to share that, I'll be at liberty to share that. It's not a big thing.
If you want to.
So the thing, my personal experience existed in leadership. The reason why I left the church, when leadership exposed to me that they didn't line up biblically, that raised my eyebrows, not on one, but several occasions. I had that experience back in 2000. And no, I'll tell you what, it was 1996. I had that experience. That's a long time ago. And I backed away from the church for a short period of time then. Then I said, well, what is it that I'm doing that's different to where I'm not really giving the church a fair chance? So I engaged in the church to a point where I was a part of every moving part of the church, as far as being a deacon, brotherhood, you name it. Anytime the doors was open, working, hands-on, repairing, being the pastor's adjutant at some point, all the way up to being to a point of going to seminary school, being ordained, even traveling on a missionary trip to the continent of Africa, even given a full clarity as far as where I should be, and given a clear effort to give the church its full opportunity. What happened in return of that, I started seeing leadership not changing. A leadership that's more focused on their benefit instead of wanting to serve the people. And according to the scriptures, we don't serve the pastors or the leaders. The leaders give the instructions on how to serve the people. And that's what you see in New Testament and you see in Old Testament, where they actually serve the people. But we find ourselves serving the pastor nowadays, or the pastors, or the leadership. And that's not the way church is set up. It's just not that way. You see what Paul gives careful illustrations on. Look, this church over here, need some need some financial help, for example, I will be by there to pick up some money so we can go and help that church. And I'm paraphrasing. You'll see conversations that took place like that with Paul. And then you see other conversations that took place where they were able to write letters to enhance the church to grow in certain areas where they have shortcomings and edifying the church in the process. So with all these things being said, I didn't see a clear picture on how we looked in the Bible that was relevant to how we live now. So I had to back away and say, Jeff, focus on you, do what you can to live right and do things that's relevant and get yourself together and help people. So that has been my effort in every aspect.
Wow. Wow. And you said something that was very, 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 very on point. You said the leaders are supposed to serve the people. You know, the biggest thing that they during Paul's time, they was trying to make sure they had enough people in place to serve the people. And it's like it's flipped now. So anybody got anything before I play this video?
Yeah, let me address something that I saw. It is absolutely asinine and ignorant to continue to say things to Black people such as we like being victims. I don't care if it's low key, high key, no key. That's just a falsity. And to see other Black people even insinuate that is retarded because of the fact we are tired of being victims.
Yep.
All right. The complaints come from people who don't have their issues addressed. All right. And so that's the issue. I think what happens is a lot of people who take these particular positions, one thing I would always ask them is, what solutions do you have to solve the problems? And 99.99% of the times, they have none. All right. And if they had any, they would have already been enacting them in their local communities where they are. So I don't listen to these talkers anymore because a lot of what you're seeing, even from those amongst us, is the conditioning, which is further evidence of the effectiveness of the philosophy of white supremacy and of the ongoing psychological terrorism that has been inflicted on our people that continues to affect their mindsets to think like this. And it's the same thing that you see in churches today. When the leadership gets in trouble, everybody rallies behind the leadership. Pray for the pastor. Now, he just slept with all the sisters in the third row and molested half of the choir stand and stole money. But pray for him because a Jezebel got to him. Nobody prays for none of the folks that he afflicted or abused or misused. And so, you know, and you go to other churches or ministries, don't defrock the priest, transfer him. All right. You know, things of this sort. Yeah. So there is this continual protecting of the abuser. Yeah. That if you chart it, this psychology goes all the way back to through slavery and through our oppression. It's Stockholm syndrome at its finest, but we've been conditioned so much so to make excuses for our abuses that we don't have a comprehensive way to address them. So you'll have people like some in the chat who will rah-rah, all right, with no solution, no way to, no idea whatsoever of how to benefit or help or aid the people. And yet it's the same thing of hearing someone who is asking for help and we're just, as folks are just sitting there saying, well, I'm going to pray for you. Even the Bible tells you that that's wrong. When you have the means to address that situation and bring some type of absolution to it and restitution to that person, you don't tell them, I'm just going to pray for you. You gather your resources and your things, and then you address that situation and you help them. You don't ignore them. It's the same thing they do by telling them when you complain about something happening in the church, they say, oh, you church hurt. But what about addressing the thing that caused the hurt? Instead of always doing the victim blaming and the victim shaming. And that same attitude, we see it leaks out. Not only is it in the churches, but it's in our communities. All right. And so you can't address these things without even people amongst your own community, within your own group, making excuses. All right. This is why every slave revolt that ever happened always had a snitch. Somebody always told. Okay. It was always undermined by one of the slaves. It was always undermined. And so, and we're dealing with the same thing now. And again, it's just the residual effects of slavery and of this type of oppressive behavior that goes unaddressed.
Yep. Yep. So I want to show a video by Jane Elliott. Before I show it, does anybody have anything?
Yeah, I would like to, before you show it, because I love Jane Elliott also. But going back to what Brother Blacktastic, Mr. Blacktastic just said too, I had an experience a few years ago with a Southern Baptist pastor. I was asked to visit a church by a brother who happens to be a missionary to Kenya part-time. And he wanted me to visit his church and start fellowshipping there. Why? Because he wanted more pepper in all of the salt. So I figured, all right, well, let me go. But I'm not going just as little Sister Diana. No, we're not going to roll up like that. So I made an appointment with the pastor, introduced myself to him. You can tell he was getting scared or uncomfortable and fearful, because when I did mention my Pentecostal background, he really got nervous. And I didn't start speaking in tongues in his office because I knew he would be scared to death. And Southern Baptists don't believe in tongues. No, we don't believe in tongues. No. And I'm saying, that's all right, Pastor. I'll pray in tongues at home. Am I welcome in your church? So long story short, we had a delightful conversation. He tried to convince me that he's not racist because his daughter actually married another white brother, but they adopted a young Black girl, and they have children over on the continent. He's not racist. He's not racist because on Sunday afternoons, they try to have the hoops open for the brothers down the road, but they won't come. I don't know why I can't get them to come. Well, because you can feel it. We can feel it. But going back to really the denominations, Sister E, you mentioned the Reformed earlier. It's not just the Roman Catholic Church. It's the Southern Baptist and anybody that's here in the Bible Belt. Anybody that's here in the Bible Belt. The vocal in the Bible Belt, you know about the Southern Baptist. That was my first experience with a Caucasian Southern Baptist. Southern Baptists back home in Brooklyn, New York, but they didn't act like that. They act like Pentecostals back there. But this was a new experience for me because now I know I'm in another jurisdiction. I'm in another territory. You're dealing with territorial spirits, okay? You're dealing with the principalities over regions. You're dealing with this stronghold that will come down. And how is it slowly coming down? Fast forward several years later, he's no longer the acting pastor. He has moved into the emeritus position. His son now, who is more open to engaging and embracing African Americans, is now the new leader. And they've begun to open, they've seen more Blacks coming in. Now, why they want to go there to that particular church, I'm not naming it, so nobody here will go to it and don't know what I'm talking about. But it's a boring church. I'm sorry. When I say boring, I just mean the life has been snuffed out. Their insistence on the politics and revering certain presidents of the United States, I believe that all of these facets as well, besides their roots and being very proud of their Texan roots, which includes slavery, I believe that that's what's also strangling that church. yes, there may be some of the newer generation that may want to come in because they don't know history. Our people just don't know the younger people don't know history. They know that George Floyd, they know about BLM, but they don't know past history. So they'll just come to a church that has only 1 hour service, some music, you can go and play hoops in the back, and that's it. But I'm concerned as well as about how do each of us get the opportunity in our individual ways, our individuality? How do we make that change? How do we make an impact? How do we bring about effect change? I think we can do it. It's going to be hard still.
I think you were trying to put that in the other chat and accidentally put it in our chat, Blacktastic. But I'm gonna go ahead and play the video real quick. Let's see. But you know what, Sister D, you said Southern Baptist. I got to get back on that, harp on it. The underlying racism you see in the Southern Baptist Church, and it's always like we're fine with our Black community. We Black. Why is it I always ask this question: why is it just the community? Why you got to separate us and say the Black community? Why are we always a byword? Maybe that's the best way to put it. The Black community.
That's good. That's good.
And that's always been my pet peeve. And I said that once to someone and in a conversation, and someone who doesn't look like me. I said, I have a question. I thought I was gonna lose my job after this, but it was lunch. And I said, why is it when you say stuff, you say, oh, my Black neighbor? Why can't it just be your neighbor? And the person got real quiet. I said, you see how that, and everybody, because she kept saying, my Black friends, my Black neighbors, my Black coworker. Why do you have to start out with Black? Why you just can't say your coworker or your neighbor? Unless you're trying to prove something. I thought I was going to be in HR after that.
It's because of social conditioning.
Yep.
You know, you have to identify Black people as Black so that you denote the fact that they're different. Just like if you say Black Jesus, which is really an error, you know, because the white one is better. So people say Black, people have been conditioned to say, well, he was Black anyway. You know, really, we should be saying white Jesus in reverse instead of Black Jesus as if it's some invention or anomaly. But see, we've been conditioned to say all of these things and preface it with Black this, Black that, because it means it's different, it's lesser, it's not better. It's a Black person trying to live up to a white image or idea. So you got to say Black Jesus, because white folks, you know, God forbid, they ever realize, yeah, he actually was a Black man, and start saying white Jesus with the same inflection and inference that they mean or say when people say Black Jesus. They got us even cracking jokes about it. Oh yeah, Black Jesus. Well, he was Black. It didn't ever be no Black Jesus. He just Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but they got us conditioned, you know, to believe in the idea of a Black Jesus because the white one that we be fanning ourselves down with at the funeral home is better.
Yes, that white Jesus image. I'm gonna be honest. That white Jesus, and people may not agree with what I'm saying. That white Jesus image has done a lot of damage. It has literally made them a god. When you look at it, and people get sensitive when I say this. I said it's true. I said, in our heads, we always saw everybody watched the 10 Commandments every Easter. And it was a full white cast. We never paid attention to the fact that this is an historical event that happened in Egypt, which is a part of Africa. But some of us as kids, because I was a kid and it never added up to me, that why are a bunch of white people in this movie? And I know it was more Black people than it was white people over there then. So why it's a mindset conditioning to think that they're gods. And that's what I said when I got older. especially when I became a part of the Israelite community, came to the concept, I came to the realization, I said, it's a God complex. I want you to see that my people are gods and you are nothing. I was a little kid. I remember going through the Bible and so mad that the Bible would have the map and it would cut right at Egypt. You never saw any part of Africa anywhere in the maps in the Bible. You just saw cut right there in that one little segment. That's all you saw. And I always wonder, you saw Asia, you saw Europe, you saw all that one section, that Africa part would be gone. Because they call that Asia Minor. That's where they preach the gospel and all that. And you got this part. But I said, why is Africa not in there? It was a mind thing. They wanted to disconnect us as far as possible from the Bible. And made it seem as if we taught y'all the Bible, but you're not a part of the Bible. The biggest uproar right now with us and certain people in the community is, how dare you say that our Savior looks like y'all? Subconsciously. They don't want to openly say it. But when you look at the movie like Color of the Cross, all those different things like that, that's the biggest thing. As long as their Savior look like them, they good. But the moment that we'll get the Savior with dreadlocks and locks, looking like Blacktastic with them locks, looking like a brother, they got a problem with that. And I said, y'all don't see the racism that y'all still carrying right now? Because what if when that sky cracked, he looked like us? What you gonna do then? You can't hear you, Sister Dion. If that sky crack and he looked like, and the racism that's in you is gonna really show. So we can. I thought, Sister D, if you're saying something, we can't hear you. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this video. Hold on.
Scared to death right now, particularly white males. They're scared to death that they are going to lose their power in the future. And they are. But if you want to get ready for the future, if you want to be treated well in the future, treat others well in the present.
Call me Louis. This is my sport. Louis Pence.
Victor Hugo said, no force on earth can stop an idea whose time has come. The idea of one race, the human race, is an idea whose time has come. We are not going to be able to stop it no matter what they do. They can elect Trump after Trump after Trump, and that will not stop the idea that there's only one race on the face of the earth. It's the human race, and we are all members of it. You and I are cousins. Now, if you don't like being my cousin, that's too bad for you. But we are all in the same family. We are members of the family of man.
You say that all whites are racist. Can you expound on that, please?
Any white person who was born, raised, and schooled in the United States of America, if you aren't a racist, you're a miracle. Either that or you decided to educate yourself. Because education in this country is about white is right, brown's all right, black's got to stand back. Yellow's mellow, but whites, we educate in a way that says that white males have done all the adventures, have made all the adventures, have done all the discovering, have made everything that is good and has been accomplished according to social studies, which is actually anti-social studies, by white males. It's a lie. But we do that in order to maintain the myth of white superiority. The myth of race has to be maintained at all costs in this country. Because if white people have to give up the color of their skin as being something that makes them perfect, what do they have left? If we start teaching the truth about history, if we start teaching about Nile Valley contributions to civilization, it will totally change the way we conduct ourselves in the classroom. It will have to. Columbus didn't discover America. You can't discover a place where people are already living. But we celebrate that every October. It's a lie. We need to get over. We need to stop telling the myths and start telling the truth.
Most people will say, I'm not racist.
I'm not a racist. Why, some of my best friends are black. Right. Yeah, and then you say, name one. Or this one, I don't see color. And when some woman says to me, I don't see color, I say, I knew that. If you saw color, you wouldn't dye your hair that way. Or I say, if you saw color, you wouldn't wear that shirt with those pants. I believe that you don't see color. It's an attempt to deny skin color. in an attempt to deny what's wrong with seeing the color of my skin. Is it all right for you to see me kind of pink? That's okay for me. I don't mind. And I suspect that you don't mind being seen the color you are. You have a right to be what you are. And until people in this country and people in this world get it into their heads that the first modern human beings that evolved on this earth were black women. They evolved in sub-Saharan Africa about 280,000 years ago. And every human being on the face of the earth today has the memory of those black women's genetic structure in their genes. Now, we don't want to admit that, but that's the way it is. And as people moved farther and farther from the equator, their bodies produced less and less melanin, so their hair, their skin, and their eyes got lighter. As they moved into the east, they ate a lot of fish and a lot of vegetables, so their skin took on a different tone. I found that out when I was raising little kids. My husband worked in a supermarket. He was the head of the produce department. And they had lots of oranges that they couldn't sell. So he'd bring them home. And I was feeding my kids orange juice like you never saw in your life. They began to have an orange cast to their skin. I thought they had a liver problem. So I took them to the doctor and she said, "What are you feeding these kids?" I said, "Well, lots of orange juice." She said, "Stop it if you want them to stop being orange." Now, if you think that skin color isn't anything other than the body's natural reaction to the natural environment, get over it.
If all white people are racist, according to you, can they be reprogrammed?
Of course they can. Of course they can. Of course they can be. It's called education. I'm an educator. The word educator comes from the root dus, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. Now, I know you can change them. The second year I did the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise in my classroom, it was filmed by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. They gave me a copy of that film. I showed it to my father. My father was about 59 years old at the time. He's been a farmer all his life. He raised six kids, lost one, raised seven. Watched that film as a 59-year-old man. When it was over, he stood up, and with tears in his eyes, he took his red handkerchief out of the back pocket of his overalls, his bib overalls, and said, "I wish somebody had taught me that when I was 9 years old." Nobody had dare say to me, "This doesn't work. This is too harsh. This isn't necessary. You can't teach an old dog new tricks," because they're wrong. You can teach an old dog new tricks. You can teach people to give up the myth of racism. Somebody taught the Greeks to give up the myth that the sun was a god in a golden chariot that went across the sky every morning. They believed that for hundreds of years. We have believed the myth of 3 or 4 races, different races in this country, for long enough. There's no such thing as reverse racism. You can only be a racist if you have the power to institutionalize what you're doing to people who are different from you. What we're calling reverse racism is natural reaction to being treated unfairly on the basis of somebody else's ignorance. Now, don't ever let anybody say to you or about anyone around you that people don't like that person because of the color of their skin. That isn't the reason white people don't like people of color. They don't like people of color because they don't understand about skin color. And they don't understand that we all are descendants of somebody who looked like your mother. You don't really want to get me started on this because
I do want to get you started.
I'm really angry about how we are miseducating the American mind.
In your exercises, in order for them to see the light, or is there another way?
It's necessary to do what we do in offices and in the military and in schools and colleges and in hospitals and in community groups all the time. What we do is we become our parent ego. We go into our parent ego state, and that forces all those we're working with into their child ego state. And if you watch our present so-called president, he spends most of his time either in his child or his parent ego state. He never gets into his adult ego state unless he's reading off the teleprompter. And he is such a poor reader that oftentimes he makes mistakes and then he is instantly in his child ego state right in front of your very eyes. It's absolutely fascinating to watch it happen. God created human beings, the human race, and they started out black women. White people created racism. Human beings created racism. It's time to get over it.
A lot of people have criticized former President Obama was not speaking out on race enough. Do you think he failed in that
What if he had spoken out enough on race? Imagine what would have happened to him. The man is still alive. Do you remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Do you remember Malcolm X? Do you remember all those people have been killed not because of the color of their skin, but because of the fear of white people, that someone who isn't white is going to look better, sound better, act better, do better than they do. Mr. Obama was the president of all of us. He wasn't just the president of black people. He was the president of all of us. The man who's there now is and claims to be the president of the people who look like him. When he says, make America great again, what he's really saying is, make America hate again. You need to realize that it is not the intent of white people to let this situation change in favor of anyone but themselves. And right now, white people are really frightened. If you don't understand the destruction of Planned Parenthood offices, and you don't understand the wall that we're going to build on the southern border of the United States, you haven't read the book, The Birth Dearth by Ben Wattenberg. Ben Wattenberg was a brilliant Jewish man who was a member of the American Enterprise Institute. And he wrote a book, the first paragraph of which says, the main problem confronting the United States today is there aren't enough white babies being born in this country. He was an advisor to presidents of the United States. He wrote the book in 1987. He says if we don't change this and change it rapidly, white people will lose their numerical majority in this country, and this will no longer be a white man's land. Now, I'm not misrepresenting this. I'm telling you almost exactly what he says. He says there are three things we can do to solve this. Number one, we could pay women to have babies, as they have been doing in Western European nations for years. Then he says, and these are his words, not mine, unfortunately, we would have to pay women of all colors to have babies, so we don't want to do that. He says the second thing we could do is increase the number of legal immigrants that are allowed into this country every year. Then once again, he says, unfortunately, the vast majority of those waiting to come to this country today are people of color, so we don't want to do that. The third thing he says, and women had better pay attention to this, 60% of the fetuses that are aborted every year are white. If we could keep that 60% alive, that would solve our birth dearth. Does that sound like racism to you?
Wow. Wow. So, all right, I'm going to stop right here. I want to get everybody's thoughts, but y'all know, after I get done with her, I got to show the girl. I got to show Dr. DeGrew. I got to, because she brought up something here recently. Well, not recently, I got to bring out. But y'all tell me what y'all thoughts are. I know Gardis. I can see it in Gardis' face. We're going to do Joy DeGrew. You're going to smile.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I could rock with Joy DeGrew. I'm not a big fan of Jane Elliott, even though she said some things that was true. But I think Mr. Blacktastic said even the devil can tell the truth as well. but no, I mean, it is what it is.
He like, I'm not neither here. I'm whatever. I'm gonna show Joy DeGrew in just a minute, because Joy DeGrew talks about the historical figures and scientific facts of racism, and explains it in America. So y'all want to watch that, or y'all want to talk about what she just said?
I definitely want to watch Dr. Joy. There was one point that she said that I wanted to hear heard, because I don't listen to a lot of Dr. Jane Elliott, but I listened to this clip. And one of the parts that she said about there's no such thing as reverse racism. That's 100,000% accurate. Because we have people out here who tell us that we're being reverse racist and other things of this sort. And the sad thing about it is we have a lot of people who won't listen to a certain truth about race and race relations until a white person says it.
Yep.
Black people will say it all day long and strong, and you won't get a peep out of a person. But you get Jane Elliott or Tim, whatever his face's name,
Tim Wise
to say it, all of a sudden their ice is colder than ours. you know.
Yep.
And so their water is wetter. And then now all of a sudden people, oh my gosh, I get it. You know. And so sometimes, you know, for the sake of that, I say, okay, you know, let's hear it out. Whether we agree with the person's complete position or not, because there are some things that people do say that can be true. And then also in the Israelite community, we got folks amongst us who sometimes we tokenize because we be so happy. Sometimes, let's just tell the truth and shame the devil, be so happy to have a white person who call us Israel and rock with us. And we can't wait to get them on platforms and put them behind pulpits and put them up there. Oh, look, this white brother, he this, that, and the other. So y'all, come on now, don't play the hypocrite, because we do this all the time. You know, we like this white one, but not that white one. And so it just, the white one got to be saying the right thing for us to accept it. So we can't have it both ways, y'all. You know, and so what I'm saying is the truth, no matter who's saying it. You know, and so the devil is a lie, but when he tell the truth, I say, well, now, you know what I'm saying? And so, but we know his overall character. So all I'm saying is there's sometimes we got to just listen to what's being said rather than focus on who's saying it. If we can sit up here and post things by Hitler that he didn't actually say, but then talk about, oh, he's speaking the truth. Y'all tell me you can't listen to Jane Elliott and other folks, things like that. You know, so we picking and choosing what we want to hear. And so what I'm saying is we got to be better listeners than that and just take that truth and then do something with it.
Yep.
Well, you know what? I say this because of the fact that I've had there's been a personal experience with Jane Elliott with me. And what I found out was people like Jane Elliott and Tim Wise, they're making this thing about talking racism into a cottage industry. These people get paid big bucks for coming out. I work for an organization that brought out Jane Elliott for $12,000 for one appearance. That's how much she's making an appearance. And for me, Jane Elliott basically says the same thing as Minister Farrakhan. But Minister Farrakhan is labeled as, you know, what they say, that quote unquote reverse racism, you know. And I don't see nobody, you know, big time organizations paying Minister Farrakhan $15,000 to, you know, make an appearance, at their organizations. Matter of fact, Dr. Frances Quest Wilson had said that she was at a gathering with, I guess a couple of white people who were talking about racism. She said at that event, I think she made like $3,000. The other white people made like 20. And this is Dr. Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, I understand, like I said, she's telling the truth, but, like it was said before, even the devil tells the truth. But you know what? I look deeper beyond just somebody telling the truth, because when the devil was trying to tempt Jesus in the Bible, it wasn't like the devil was lying to him, but the intentionality of using that information to trip Jesus up or to try to trip Jesus up is something that I look at when I see people who are suspect to those particular characteristics. You can tell me that this is true, but why are you telling me this? There's got to be some intentionality behind it. Truth is always true, but it's neutral in a sense where it can be used against you. Mm-hmm. So that's why I say it's got to be more than just you telling the truth.
I say this, brother. I hear what you're saying, and I see exactly and see it. But who does this? Who makes these people viable to us as a people? We do that. And so what I'm saying is, if, you know, and this is what I was saying earlier, we believe everybody else's ice is colder than ours and everybody else's water is wetter than ours. You know, and like I said, look at how we do, and it's no different than how folks did in the Bible. Israel killed all the messengers. That was Israelites. All the prophets in the Bible are Israelites, and they were killed by Israelites. All right. But and so that mentality still exists today, even amongst us, is that familiarity breeds contempt. And when somebody of our own tells us the truth, because Martin Luther King was not very popular toward the end of his life. We got a holiday now. We celebrate him. All these folks talking about the dream. But from 1965 to 1968, Black people turned their back on him and almost hated him. Folks were split about Malcolm X. And now all of a sudden, everybody's an X this or X that. But when him and Elijah was going at it, folks picked sides between these two powerful Black men, and a lot of them chose against Malcolm. But now everybody wants to represent Malcolm. And so this is a sickness amongst us. And what I'm saying is all of these things I hear, but at the end of it all, at the end of the day, we got to look at ourselves in the mirror and see why is Tim Wise and Jane Elliott's voice so prominent is because we not listening to the other people that we've had amongst us. I live with a man that did this all his life and died at 50 years old. And I sat there in resentment for the next 15 years after my father died, blaming the people that he spent his life giving it to for killing my father earlier. Because my dad worked from sun up to sundown to educate Negroes who didn't appreciate it. Okay, and so what I'm saying is, man, we got to look at ourselves. We got a cat on right now, you know, who's sitting up here, who talking about some popo vu and all of this other crap, and folks couldn't wait when he came out to get him up. Oh, this is our white Israelite brother. And so that's what I'm saying, man. We do this to ourselves. Wow. You know, so if we don't blame anybody, we gotta first blame us. If we don't want these people to be pushed to us, then don't go support them. Let them talk, because they really should be educating white people.
Bingo.
Okay, that's what they really should be. Bingo. And so let them go to their people as their prophets and say, hey, y'all wrong for doing this. And they're wrong for doing that. But
I agree with you. They need to go tell they folks about what they doing.
I mean, just look at us. We get a white rapper. Oh, that white boy can throw down. Now the white boy is the best rapper. White DJ, anything white is better than what we already have. And so we do this. And so Black folks, we got to look at ourselves honestly. You know, and so that's all I'm saying. And people don't like to hear it, but this is the truth. We colonized, Europeanized, Hellenized, we all kinds of nized. We everything but Blackanized.
Yeah, it's funny you was talking about Dr. King and how much he was hated, you know, towards the end of his life. And me and another guy was talking about this, how when Dr. King came to Chicago in 1966, it was like 4 pastors that came out to support him. Now it's like 100 pastors talking about, yeah, I support Dr. King, or I marched with Dr. King. I'm like, dude, I remember people talking to me, you know, my dad talking to me, I'm reading the history books. There were only 4 pastors supporting him up here in Chicago. Most of the pastors up here, and especially most of the Black ones, couldn't wait for Dr. King to leave. But now all of a sudden you got 100 pastors talking about, yeah, we supported Dr. King when he came up here. I'm like, you know, it's like one of those mythical, it's like one of those events that nobody went to, but then when it got popular, you know, as it went, you know, as time goes on, oh yeah, I was there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, just think about the mentality. You got where Vietnamese congregate is Little Saigon, where the Chinese congregate is Chinatown, where the Italians at is Little Italy, you know, where the Russians at is Little Russia, where the Black folks at is the ghetto. You see what I'm saying? So we got to take our own power back and stop letting other people preach to us about our problems or label us things. And we have to wake up. Now, like I said, I'm in education too. I'm open to truth from wherever it comes from, you know. But I know who I'm gonna run with, who I'm gonna hang with at the end of it all.
Okay.
You know, now when I come to Chicago, brother, we gotta go, you know. See, now I don't even want to come to Chicago and go get an Italian beef with you. We gotta go get some soul food now. See?
I'm a vegetarian. We might have to.
All right, well, see, we gotta go to the vegan spot now. See, but you know, it's just all of these different things. So we have to do something about us starting here first, because we have all these mixed feelings and mixed emotions because of what has happened to us. We still coming out of the residual effects of, you know, of the things that have been done to us. Dr. Joy talks about it very well, probably as well as anybody I've heard since Dr. Welsing and others who have passed on now, you know. And so I'm looking forward to listening to this clip.
I will binge watch Dr. Joy stuff. I spent one day just watching back to back, and I was like, she makes so much sense with everything. But you made a point, and then we can watch her. You said we need to focus, in so many words, you're saying we need to focus on our own. But you know what happens when we say that? Oh, you're being racist. How am I being racist? Because I want to see my people do better.
Well, here's the thing on that, Sister E. You can have, again, like what Father G illustrated, you can have the same exact content coming out of our minister Louis Farrakhan's mouth, and the reaction would be total opposite.
Yep.
Total opposite.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. They banned him from Facebook. He ain't even allowed on certain social media platforms.
Yep.
You know, get him
Facebook,
out, get him
YouTube, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's interesting about that is, remember Farrakhan and Dr. Wilson and I think it was Khalil Muhammad. They were on Donahue in the 90s. I don't know if y'all remember those shows.
I still watch those shows.
And it's amazing how Donahue could get those people on his show. But then when Arsenio Hall gets Minister Farrakhan, they threatened to shut his program down.
They didn't threaten, they did it.
Oh yeah, they did it. Okay, yeah, they sure did. So Donahue could get all of those people that I just said, and never a threat of a shutdown for Donahue.
You know why? Because it's a different mentality behind it. When Donahue does it, it's really a presentation of white America to say, here's why you should be afraid. When black folks do it, when Arsenio brought on Minister Farrakhan, it was, here's why you shouldn't be afraid.
Yeah, I agree.
To black America. And so you have this type of mentality, you know, that's, again, it's been taught to us, you know, all throughout. So anytime, you know, a person that's a threat to the system, or that even would threaten to educate black people and make them think independent of the dominant society, is a person that's going to be blackballed and labeled. Marcus Garvey was doing exactly what white people wanted, getting ships to take black folks back to Africa, and they sunk them ships and ruined them so we couldn't leave. And then they deported him back to Jamaica. So I mean, it's you know, and then you had black folks who were leading the charge against him, like W.B. Du Bois, you know, who helped found the NAACP. So all of this stuff, man, it just, there's a psychology amongst us that we really got to face. We need group therapy, and we need a group therapy session where, and I'm not even being racist, I'm just being real. We need a group therapy session where nobody else is allowed but us.
Yes, healing. We need to heal. Sister D, you muted. You don't have anything?
I was just saying, nobody but us. That's
Yep. I agree.
Absolutely.
I
agree 100%. I you know, we have to bridle our tongues on platforms like this because we want, you know, Sister E's channel to remain on because it's very vital to us. And so yeah, there are limitations to a conversation here, but in relations to the church, there was a time that the church was doing a large portion of the job. Uh, I've we all listen to Brother Berean on some of his on so many rants. But one thing that stuck with me on one of the rants when he was firing off at the conscious community on how they were discrediting the church, and in one of his rants, it carefully illustrated that it was the church that established some of the first schools for us. It was also the church that set up organizations that protested and wrote letters and did walkouts and picketing and all sorts of things that took place, and that was very beneficial to the communities. It was the church that did that. It was also the church that taught the basic fundamentals around throughout the society that most people have respect for. So if you pass by, you either put your drink down, you stop cussing, and there were other things that were involved in that. So the church had a very high regarded image at one point. What happened in the middle of all of that, I don't know. You can't really necessarily place it on crack cocaine. You can't place it on social. You can't put the blame on social media. You can't really put it on any of those things. Maybe we're too educated, to a point where we feel like we know too much. So to a point where we don't. Leaders have gotten to be more individualized than being a part of the community and acting as the community. Maybe that is what we went wrong at. So there are many things that could have gone wrong in the church that was progressively going wrong. That could be something that we need to look carefully at, because if we lose the last little stronghold that we have on the church, then the question is, will it be gone for good? Or do we set up the church on platforms that we see like we have now? It's something to evaluate carefully. And then again, our communities are changing constantly too, because the community that existed 40 or 50 years ago, as far as demographically, doesn't look like us anymore. It has changed. It may be the bulk of it may be Italian, the bulk of it may be Latino community or others, to where that church isn't relevant in that particular community. And that's how we set up our churches in the communities that we lived in and we shopped in, and that we were involved in. So these things, I believe, had some factor, because as we gained a little bit more money, we moved out of those communities. We moved to different states and did different things with our lives. And we began to be a lot more individualized instead of being more communal. I believe that had a lot to do with losing the strength of the church, because if you look where you were at one time, 30 or 40 years ago, in the church that you grew up in, where you got your foundation from, we had individuals that we looked highly upon and we relied on for certain information or a certain image even. And that's what kept us along the way. Not idolizing them, but having that respect and that regards to for them. And we have to, again, find out where we can contribute back to the church, not so much on a level where it will be a building itself, but as a community that we are all a part of. What do we contribute back to it, to where we can be practical in our learning, in our way of life, and in the way that we fellowship with one another.
And that's a good point you made with that. When you said earlier that what we're doing here is church. Mm-hmm. This is exactly what church is probably going to be, and probably more popular because of the fact And I don't think it's the fact that, we're all too intellectual for folks. I think folks understand the message, but I think, I agree with you that the assemblies or the church has to be reconfigured to a way where we got to make the gospel more relevant to people. I think we got too many, one of the problems is that we got not only just, white pastors and priests, and even black pastors and priests who are teaching a white theology, not only teaching a white theology, but teaching an outdated gospel message that would have worked back in the 40s and 50s. And they're trying to teach it today in, 2021. And this is one of the reasons why the young people are walking away from the church, because they don't feel any relevancy with it. I've talked to a number of young people, and some of them have just said, the church that I went to, the pastor was talking to the old folks. Nobody's talking to the young people. That's why they're walking away. And obviously, if you don't have young people in the church, that's a dying church.
Correct.
That church is going to die in a couple of years, because these old folks that are trying to hold up the church, they're going to pass away.
Yep.
And so the gospel relevancy is actually rooted in social justice.
Correct.
Because we got to deal with the issue. We got to deal with the world that we're in. Jesus did not turn away any topics that were given to him in regards to the Pharisees asking him questions about if we should pay taxes or how marriage should be. Jesus didn't say, well, we shouldn't deal with that. We should just deal with the spirit. No, Jesus gave them an answer that was relevant to their times. So we can't pray away or say, we should just wait until we get to heaven to figure all this out. No, Jesus gave them modern answers that basically kind of blew their minds. But we're not supposed to teach social justice, right?
Yeah.
And what they did to Jesus, same thing they did to Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. They killed him because that's what they do.
Exactly.
Anytime you upset the apple cart and mess with the money or the system, and you start redirecting it to the folks that's supposed to get it, then they find a way to get rid of you. And until we learn how to consolidate, to take the analogy from the mother on soul food, we got to become the fist,
Yeah.
We got to become the fist. But we always got Negroes who get a nickel above starvation and move 2 blocks outside of Neckbone Village, and now they think they have arrived. So now they start preaching to us about we have to integrate. No, we don't have to integrate. Integration was one of the worst things that ever happened to us, and I'm not the only one saying it. Martin Luther King said it. He said he integrate. He said he made a mistake. He said we integrated into a burning house. We needed desegregation for equal opportunity, not integration to give away our opportunity. And that's what happened. And that's why you have the pastors now are not as strong as a lot of the ones before then who were willing to go to church with a gun on them and the deacons all being packed so that the folks wouldn't get lynched and the church wouldn't get burned down. But now they're telling you all of these things. Oh, y'all can't be like that. We got to suffer for this. We got to suffer for that. They fighting against CRT, but they okay, with all of the other kind of stuff that's going on. And so, it's because they gaining something from it. And so, this country, if the country ever practiced the gospel, instead of looked at black folks as being 3/5 of a human being and taught things like this in this book I have from theologians of the 1800s who said the Negro was a beast made in the image of his master, not God, his master, the white man, then we wouldn't be where we are now. We live in a democracy of hypocrisy that's never practiced what it's preached, but has always told everybody else, do what we say and not what we do. And then we got black folks out here buck dancing for butter biscuits, and they don't want to give up the biscuits, and they can't stop dancing, and they telling us what to do, and they want to use the Bible to try and tell us this is how we're supposed to act. And so, and then you like I say, you look at the turmoil we're in. We up here singing funeral dirges as victory songs. We shuffling. We shall overcome. We ain't overcome yet. The white folks are singing praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. We walking, talking about overcoming. They loading up. How we gonna win like that? We got to change our minds, our tunes, our whole orientation if we ever gonna get off the plantation.
Yep.
Breathe.
You're right.
I'm messing with him.
So, I mean, what do you do when you have individuals that teaches large groups of people that you should remain passive and turn the other cheek?
You leave. That's all to it.
Did you see this?
We can have an exodus before the exodus. You just leave.
You just leave.
You leave.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's we have to stop feeling obligated to people who are not obligated.
I agree. I agree.
Well, you know, it's so interesting. You mentioned about, self-defense and, how the civil rights movement was, told in the story of, quote unquote, nonviolence. And so I read this book last year. It's called This Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed.
It's a great book.
And it talks about how many of the Southerners were actually armed. Wow. And they only armed themselves in cases of self-defense. Now, one of the groups that were talked about in this book was the Deacons of Defense. I know some of you might know who they are. Blacktastic, you seem smiley. Yeah, I see everybody shaking their head. Deacons of Defense were an armed group of church people. And so the thing is that we got to reclaim the narrative of this whole struggle that we have. Now, don't get me wrong. At the core of it, it was nonviolent. But at the same time, there were people in Mississippi that was with it. They was with the ish. Yeah. And if they were going to get attacked by the Klan, obviously there was going to be a gunfight. There was not going to be no turning any cheek. If they come in with guns, we going to return fire right back.
Mm-hmm. And that right there, man. Then the other thing too, when people talk about turn the other cheek, I did a whole teaching on this, and I'm gonna have to revisit. They don't even understand the idiom of what he was talking about. Why? First of all, they forget that Yeshua didn't turn the other cheek until he had to go to the cross. And even then, he wasn't turning the other cheek. He was standing up for us. He whipped folks out the temple twice. All right. He told the apostles to take swords with them into the garden. He was going to be the one taken. He had them take weapons for their defense. When Peter cuts the man's ear off, the only thing he corrects Peter about is defending him, not Peter defending himself. In other words, they wasn't taking the swords to prune the leaves in the Garden of Gethsemane. They took the weapons to defend themselves. Right. In case things got to that point where they had to do that. He didn't want them defending him. But see, what we've been so, brainwashed into believing we can't defend ourselves. And we can't, I think Brother Dante said in the chat, he go to church with his gun on. I go with mine too, whenever I go anywhere. I mean, so it's, and it's not because I'm thinking about violence, all this, he who lives by the sword, all these scriptures get misquoted to us. If you live by the sword, you die by the sword. That means if I live a life of violence, I don't live a life of violence. I live a life of vigilance. That means I'm using wisdom and common sense. And yeah, if they sing and praise the Lord and pass the ammunition, I am too. Because I'm going to protect myself, my family, my community, and I have a right to do that. And that right came from the Most High. They took all those rights from us because the more vulnerable people are, the easier they are to control. And so, and we keep getting this narrative preached to us, and it's literally being preached to us in a lot of these ministries, man. And I just, it's like the black church in particular has been neutered, you know. And so keep you silent, keep you docile, and so that, you know, when other folks get hostile, we fall on our knees. I'm not doing that.
Yep. And that's what happened when I was up there.
I'm gonna die pray standing up.
That's it. And the thing is, what's interesting is it was a whole guilt trip coming at me. Sister E, you know you're not supposed to be talking like that. Sister E, you gotta have faith. Where is your faith? Where is your love? And I'm sitting there saying, love my oppressor. Okay. Show me where Christ loved his oppressor. They can't show that to me. They're going to go find some scripture, but nowhere. What did Christ do? Fight for the oppressed. And we've been commissioned to fight for the oppressed, see to the oppressed. So that's why I'm sitting here like, so telling me that social justice should not be brought into the pulpit goes against everything that Christ taught. Because again, how are you loving your neighbor, but you're oppressing them?
Oh, but the conversation goes like this. Oh, show me a scripture. Where it said in the scripture? You see it in the action.
Yep.
You see it in what was taking place.
Yep.
So if you see it taking place, you go and run people out of the temple. What do you say? Not once, but twice.
Correct.
That sounds like an action. That doesn't say, "Oh, I'm gonna pray for y'all that y'all leave." That doesn't say like that. Nowhere. If you want to go back in the Old Testament, same thing. I always say, look at what Moses did. He went to Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go." And from that was the standoff in itself. And we know the history behind that. And it goes on throughout the entire history of the Bible. And so if you don't see the actual action itself, what's wrong with you? It's Bible. Now, does it have to quote scripture? No, you see the action itself. So how do you avoid it when it's there? Do you take these off and clean them and put them back on and hope you see it? I hope if that's the effect that it takes for you to see it, then let it be it. But it's there, it's clear. Why would you want to find a scripture?
Correct. It's your action.
It's the action, period.
And you know what? Since they love Paul so much, let's go talk about Paul, beloved Paul. I thank God that we did that New Testament survey. Y'all gave me Philemon. And in Philemon, it talked about how Paul was telling, who was it? It wasn't Philemon. Who was Paul telling to love the slave as your brother? I can't remember off the top of my head.
That was Philemon.
Yeah.
Paul was telling him to love Onesimus. Yeah.
Yes, Onesimus.
Bring him back as a brother, not as a slave.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So let's go straight to Paul. Paul told you how to treat your slaves. Now let's look at the transatlantic slave trade. Is there any similarities there? No. It's far off. So that's why when they do that whole, I did get a little ugly though, Jeff, because I kind of lost it there for a second. I was just like, I'm done with the butter biscuit parade. I'm done. I'm finna give y'all the real E now. I'm trying to be nice and tiptoeing the tulips, but that's it. I'm done. And I saw myself lose it. I was like, come back. By the time I said come back, I had said so much that I was like, well, I done said it now. And everybody got quiet. And some of and they pulled me off the panel to say, y'all, let's just pray for Sister E. Literally, they was going there like, pray for Sister E. And folks was like, no, that ain't it. Pray for y'all. And somebody else, I don't know, somebody went on the panel and told them, y'all wrong for how y'all did her. And they brought me back. Mm-hmm. And they thought they was bringing me back. And I was finna say, oh, okay. I went in on all of them when they brought me back up there.
They needed that.
That's it, because I'm not here with the coonery buffoonery. Period. I'm just not here.
And you know, I think, and this is why we got to get together, because you know, maybe y'all might agree with me or disagree with me, but you know, Paul is one of the most misunderstood, you know, works in the Bible. And I see people shaking their heads, so I guess people agree with me on that one. Mm-hmm. But this is why we have to have these conversations, because of the fact that, you know, when we interpret scripture, you know, it gets very dicey. But then again, you know, sometimes stuff can be simple. Sometimes it could be a little complicated. Yep. But when you look at the overall message of, like, say, a person like Paul, you know, we always look at this argument that he has with, you know, who's saved? Is it the Gentiles? Is it the Jews? And when we were talking about, and I thought about this when we were talking about earlier about how Christianity was presented, you know, to the indigenous people here and also in Africa, even though Christianity was already in Africa when the Europeans came. But it was more of a, if you don't accept our culture, then you don't accept Christianity.
Yes.
And the problem is that when you look at somebody like Paul, he's not necessarily talking about, you know, salvation is either with the Jews or the Gentiles, or, you know, whatever the conversation is going on. The thing is that Christianity within itself is supposed to work in any culture. And what Paul is really preaching is, preach the gospel where you are. You don't necessarily have to be a Jew in order to preach the gospel of Jesus.
Yep. Basically,
preach the gospel where you are. And the problem with the European ministers who came into Africa and Asia and tried to impose a white Jesus on them, they were imposing not only a false Christianity, but they were imposing a white culture on these people to make it look like God is white, so you should be worshiping God. And not only trying to, you know, mix up the word of Paul, you know, just like most people are doing now, and saying that you need to be just like this in order to be a Christian, instead of saying this is what Christianity can do for you, or this is what the gospel can do for you.
Yep.
So I just hate it when people think they have Paul figured out, and when somebody comes and say, well, I don't think, you know, I think something different. And they're like, well, you don't know nothing about the Bible. I'm like, okay, all right, whatever. You know, I'll tell you right now, I'm not a Bible expert. All right. I'm not a biblical scholar or anything. All I'm doing is just interpreting it the best way I can.
Don't do that. You know, you are a scholar. Don't play.
No. But you know, it's so funny because you know, I'm in seminary, and I think there's a value to it, because most of these seminaries, and this is probably why a lot of ministers, you know, they're pumping out a lot of these conservative ministers out of these seminaries now, that is teaching this way of, you know, you got to accept European culture in order to water down Christianity and European culture in order to accept Christ. But, you know, I find value in it because of the fact that I'm glad I'm in it now, because of the fact that now I have to put up my defenses of, okay, they're trying to indoctrinate me with white Christianity. So let me throw something back at them to say, hey, this is not what I learned. Because, you know, for me, and Sister E, you said this in the beginning, I learned more from y'all than I learned in school. And when I take some of the stuff that I learned from y'all to school, they be like, that's interesting. So I, you know, like I said, the information I get from here, it's stirring people up at the school that I'm at.
Keep stirring them up. Keep stirring them up.
Yes.
And Sister E, what you did that night, it was necessary. It was raw, uncut, to the point, and it was chastising. So hopefully they took that home and marinated a little bit in it. You know, see if they can get a little tenderized, from this point on. So hopefully they did, prayerfully they did, because again, those are our brothers and those are our brothers in Christ, and we have to embrace, and we have to, we have to battle it out for righteousness' sake. No different than what they did in the New Testament, where we see how you see a lot of it in the book of Acts and in Galatians and other places where they didn't necessarily agree on everything and they hashed it out. So we, in that same aspect, and it was involving a little bit of ethnicity too. It was a little salt and pepper of ethnicity involved in that conversation. It took place back in Acts and so on. And with that being said, we have to keep hashing things out like we're doing, push forward, and try to be relevant in our conversations also. And by doing that, hopefully and prayerfully, we'll get the message across that there is a reason why individuals are leaving the church.
Correct.
It's a legitimate reason. And we need to try to grab hold of them, not to pull them back in the church, but to make sure that the healing and edification and the building up of the church is being done on the individual and on a larger scale. It's very necessary.
I want to say something. I've never felt that the church should be overthrown, but I do strongly feel that it should be overhauled. And that means you got to throw out some of these leaders, because the problems in an assembly always start at the top and trickle down. Everybody want to talk about how the blessings trickle down, but if the head is wrong, then the rest of the body gonna be off too in any organization. And most of the problems start with leadership and then go all the way down. And because leadership goes unchecked, just like when you asked earlier, Jeff, what do we do if we got a person that's doing this, that, and the other? The people have to stand up for themselves at some point in time, and you have to exit. You have to leave. You are not a slave anymore. That you got to stay anywhere and allow people to abuse you, misuse you, or mislead you and mistreat you. And then another point that Gardis brought up, a great point about the white Jesus thing. And I don't say this to everybody. One of the reasons I can listen to other people like Jane Elliott and different ones like this is not because I'm necessarily their fan. But my father said, always listen to your opposition or your oppressor so you understand how they think. Because if you know how they think, then you know how to counteract these things and come up with strategies that help your people. From research and history, the reason why Attila the Hun was so hated by the Romans was because he was trained by the Romans and he learned everything that they did, and then he took it back to his people and he said, now this is what we gonna do. And so we as a people have to learn to be more strategic than emotional. Ain't nothing wrong with being, let me say this, because they was accusing my sister of being emotional. But emotion under control is powerful. We all emotional about something. And if you don't have no fire in you, then I don't trust you. All right? I don't want no monotone person trying to tell me what to do. You got to show me some passion and some fire. And her fire was appropriate. All right? It's just other people were not used to that because, and then there's another thing too. Let me just say this, because they want black women to always shut up when they on a panel with a bunch of black men and they calling brothers out. Brothers don't like to be showed up, so they want a black woman to shut up. You see what I'm saying? And she stood by herself and on her own. And when we see that, other black men have to come to their aid and stand with them instead of let everybody else pile on them. So I salute and applaud my sister. But emotions under control, where a person is allowed to speak clear and express themselves, is a powerful thing, And so you look at the society that has dominated us and then research them and look at the psychology behind it. They come from a culture, again, very warlike, very violent. And then somewhere along the way, they decide their savagery is civilization and everybody else is savages. But even going back to medieval times, one of the most hostile ways of encroachment that was first a psychological tactic before it became physical was when you wanted to take over someone else's territory or invade their land, you started building a castle on their property. So you moved your people in and you start building fortifications. I almost said fornication. You ain't build fornication, but you built fortifications. That's why Europe got so many castles all over the place, because it's a land that reflects the hostility from which it was developed. So you built a fortification or a stronghold so you could garrison soldiers, and eventually you move more and more people in till the Lord or whoever controlled that land had to respond, and then you went to war and you end up taking over that land. You did the next thing to the next neighbor, to the next one, to the next one. Look at how they took over America. They built one little settlement. They built another little settlement. They expanded and expanded. One settlement turned into 13 colonies. 13 colonies pushed all the way to the Mississippi River. Then 13 colonies took over Texas, went to war with Mexico under false pretenses, took over the rest of the Western United States. Then and all over, you see the same thing happen everywhere. And then they say, we're protecting our interests. Now, what does this have to do with white Jesus? Well, because number one, we know Yeshua looked like us. He looked like black folks. This is a historical fact. All right. But when you want to initiate a hostile takeover of someone else's ideology to make them worship you as the deity, you start changing the face of the deity. You start just like you encroach on someone else's land to slowly take it over, you encroach on someone else's culture. You encroach on their religion. You change the faces and the places, the names and all of these other things. And before long, the people are speaking your language. The people are worshiping their God the way you worship him, which is not the way they were taught to worship them. So now black families got a white Jesus in their house instead of white folks having a black Jesus in theirs, because they've been building castles on our minds, taking over space, occupying, just bringing this invading force in. And then we wonder what the heck happened. And so this is the same psychological tactics that they use that then become physical actions. It's always something subtle that then becomes a pretext to a greater action to justify whatever it is they do. How they get the whole continent of Africa? They had to first small things. And it's a bunch of little things that end up creating a big thing, and it just snowballs. And this is what we have. And so we end deeper than what we realize, because this psychological warfare been being worked on us for centuries now. And we need to get wiser. And so we have to examine and look at these particular things, because the only way you're going to undo what's been done to you is you got to understand what's been done to you the way they did it.
There's an old saying, Neely Fuller says, if you don't understand white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else will only confuse you.
That's what he says. Amen to that.
Sister D, you said you wanted to show something. Are you ready?
Yes, I will. I'll try to make it very short and sweet.
No.
I'm going, I just like to share that I'm going to a family reunion this Sunday. This family reunion, I wish I could bring all of y'all with me. I wish I could bring all of my family with me. All of y'all out there, I wish I could bring all of y'all with me, because I'm going to the family reunion of the descendants of the enslavers of my father's mother's line. So I went last year. I broke the ice. I came in with all the history. But this Sunday, if I can share my screen, I want to show you a photograph. And even those who are watching, I would just like to get their take. What's their impression? Now, this is old history. For those who are history buffs, this is ancient history. My great-granduncle was born in 1856. He died in 1950, a year before I was born. Do the math. I was one of the first Black kids in New York City to integrate the schools. Do the math. At the age of 11 in 1961. Do the math. I have been doing the family history because these people who are the descendants of the enslavers, some of them must have a little guilty conscience or they're feeling remorse. I have gotten from one or two of them the sense that we have to find a way of making up for this. We have to find a way. We need penance. We need to repent. We need to confess, repent. So one of the ways is to, of course, welcome me and my family, okay? They have one favorite Black man that they love, and that was my great-granduncle. I'm going to show the picture really quickly, if I can. And oh no. Can you see that? Okay. We're talking about church, and we're talking about church. We're talking about church. The man on the right, I found out, is related to these enslavers. He's a preacher. At this point, he is a preacher. He's known as Brother Pat, the preacher. His history, I found out, was that he was a mess when he was a young boy. Due to family dysfunction in the family, he ended up becoming an alcoholic, has a huge history throughout, I believe it's West Virginia on down to South Carolina. He has a whole history. But one day, the Lord came into his life. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. The Lord came into his life. And so he began to do what evangelists do, what revivalists do. He began to do the work, the real work of the gospel. And ultimately, he ended up in North Carolina, where my great-granduncle, that wonderful man there, standing there, all of these former enslavers and their descendants love him so much. I've heard all of these glowing stories about how well he was loved. But Brother Blacktastic, my great-granduncle also was a bodyguard for one of those Confederate officers. And you know he was packing over there somewhere in one of those pockets. So I have a wonder sometimes if he was so well loved because he didn't take any mess. But then they had to respect him because he also demanded the respect of all of the enslavers and the descendants. Evidently, Preacher Pat found out about great-granduncle Irvin's religion. Great-granduncle also had a brother named Albert, after who my father was named after. I understand Albert used to sit at the feet of the enslaver's wife and learn to read the Bible. She taught him to read the Bible because she was a Sunday school teacher. Oh, it makes me feel so good. And then Uncle Irvin also had another brother. That's a story for another day because I wrote some articles and I have done extensive research on him as a church, as a AME minister. What I'm bringing out here is the effect because, of course, Brother Pat, Preacher Pat, came to the Lord, and evidently he wants to meet this wonderful Black man, former slave, that everybody so respects. And I'm sure Uncle Irvin was saying, you're going to respect, and you're going to keep your religion, and I know the Lord as well. However, in our family, we have this history This is on my father's mother's side. We have the history also of men who then became preachers who did exactly what the W.E.B. Du Bois and back in the day, the Booker T. Washingtons, all of those guys back then, they started schools. They began churches, planted churches here and there, but then they became a threat to the system. And then you have, well, I can go on, but I wanted to show you this picture because I wanted you to see ancient history for many of our watchers. This is a man, 1856 to 1950, but he has to deal with racism and he has to deal with the religion that's been taught to his siblings and to himself, but he's got to show true religion. And I'm sure that this preacher had to respect the fact that this is a man who will deal with the situation, because if he was on the Confederate pension roll, they passed a bill for my great-granduncle to get pension from the Confederate Army. But they had to respect the man. So you and that same genetic that strength, that power, and that determination that you don't mess with my people, you don't mess with my family. Yes, I had to serve you, but this is a new day. That came straight on down the line. And I'm glad that I got his genes in me. So I just wanted to share this because y'all pray for me, because I got to do this reunion on Sunday. And I don't know how in the world I'm going to end up talking about the other rest of the family. I'm going to bring, they know, because the ice has been broken. They know already that I told them last year, no, I'm not here because I feel goosebumps and fuzzies. Not at all. You have to confront the history. You have to know the whole history. You've got to know everything. You got to know about my people, that they were not just the slaves, and that they lived on this, and they've been living on the same land in the plantation, which some of the Cherokee owned that same land, but they were driven out on the Trail of Tears, of course. So I'm going to have to deal with this on Sunday. Y'all pray for me. As they say in church, pray my strength in the Lord. I'm going to need it.
Amen.
Yes. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you.
That was great.
Hey, you better play that video for Talisha. Y'all have a conniption.
We got to pray for
You got me cracking up in that chat.
God. They keep saying,
I love that, Mother D. I love that.
Man. Especially you making me think about the slave narratives when you did that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was heavy.
Yep.
That was really, really heavy.
You know, Sister D has been trying to teach me something about history, because I'm always going to her for wisdom during the times that I struggle with accepting the fact that I have a grandfather, fourth grandfather, I believe, that was European. And that part right there I struggle often with, because I value more of the 92% African history than I do any other part of it. But that's not the only history I have that's a part of me. And Sister D carefully illustrated the importance of embracing all of it, because it is a part of you and it's a part of the truth. So if we embrace truth, then we still have to embrace it all. We may not like the idea of it, but we still have to embrace it, because it's a part of our makeup, our structural makeup. So I commend you on this, and I'm still learning, Sister D. I don't think I'm there yet.
I don't think she's embraced. I think she's confronting it.
Yes, let me explain. It's not a matter of embracing. It's confronting. I have to recognize the fact that I have short hair, not long hair. I have to accept the fact that, yes, I've got short toes, not long toes. That's all part of who I am. I'm not trying to encourage the people on Sunday that we love them, that I love them. No, they're going to have to accept the fact that our people have had achievements, that we are not all poor and broken down and living in a shack. They have to understand that. They have to understand that we have made inroads. They have to see a living Black person, and not just myself. There'll be a couple other cousins there too. But what they need to see are the Black descendants of the people that their parents and great-grandparents and great-grandparents enslaved, know that they were not just people working out there in that field slaving. We are people that have a long history, and engaging and letting them know about DNA as well, so that they can learn about the roots in Africa. So it's a lot. It's not just that I want to go. I didn't ask to go. They asked me to come. So let me get that straight too. I did not ask to go to this reunion. They are asking me to come. So what is it? Education. There's some of them that want education, as old as they are. They're doctors, they're historians, and they're professors. If they want to know the truth, they're going to get the truth.
Give them that truth, sis, because I know Sister D gonna give them the truth and nothing, and it makes them face their history. It's no longer something that we possibly did. It allows them to get face to face with, this is what we did. And here's one of the ancestors, here's one of the relatives that my ancestor enslaved, because they try to push slavery far in the past. Like, oh, it ain't been that long ago. Truly, it's not that long ago. So you making them face it head on, Sister D. And I am praying for you. I know you're gonna go in there with the word, the fire of Yah in you. It's gonna be interesting. Call me after the fact and tell me how it goes, because I got to hear it.
I want to hear too how it goes.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, show me the video.
They have to do a group call.
Shoot.
Look at Gardis. Look at him. He's ready to see it.
I'm ready to see this. I want to see this.
If Gardis was near you, he'd be in the car with you. Like, we going together.
Exactly. We about to slam this on the table like, bow.
Yes.
Now, what's the address of this location?
Come on now. Come on.
Oh my goodness. Let me play this Joy the Group for these people put me on the hit list. Here we go. Now, early scientific racism in America explained by Joy DeGruy. Here we go. Oh, let me cut the speaker on
And then, of course, and this is interesting about John Newton, because we all know about, and first thing you hear, John Newton, what's the next thing you hear? Amazing Grace. John Newton, Amazing Grace. Well, let's figure out what happened before he got Amazing Grace. He said slaves are lesser creatures without Christian souls and thus are not destined for the next world. Now, what becomes important about this kind, and you'll see it both in American history as well, there is this kind of dehumanization of African people. Because you got to ask yourself this question: how do people who deem themselves superior, who see themselves as the civilizers, who recognize themselves as what we call manifest destiny, the white man's burden of civilizing all the rest of the races, how do you reconcile being the superior being and engaging in barbaric behavior? What that produces is something called cognitive dissonance. How many people are familiar with that? Cognitive dissonance is really thinking discord. It's when you begin to feel conflict between what you believe or understand or hold to be true, and you are then faced with behaviors, either in yourself or others, that conflict with your fundamental belief. It produces cognitive dissonance. Human beings don't function well with cognitive dissonance. You must remove the cognitive dissonance in order to function. So in order for people to perpetuate slavery and to perpetuate that whole system that lasts for centuries, You had to remove all dissonance associated with it. Can't be anything wrong with me. Certainly isn't us. We're the civilizers. We're the superior. So it must be them. Oh, yes. Well, you see, they don't even have souls. Now I can go to sleep because I'm not really dealing with a human being. Are you following me? Okay, let's see what else he said. He said, when the women and girls are taken on board a ship naked, trembling, terrified, they are often exposed to the wanton rudeness of white savages. The prey is divided upon the spot. Look at the choice of words, the prey. Resistance or refusal would be utterly in vain. And he says, I sinned with a high hand. Yeah, and then he wrote Amazing Grace. Okay. So it's really important to understand that hand in hand with the behavior was a mindset that is so damaging. You see, I call it the secret. Not the secret that everybody's been talking about, that secret. The secret is the kind that makes you sick. How many people here are in mental health, have done direct mental health treatment with folks? You know that the secrets make us sick, yes? Isn't it the secrets that cause people the pathology? Right? How long have white people had to hold this secret? How long and how many generations had to stop and pretend Grandpa didn't do what he did? That the wealth we enjoy was not on the backs of some of these little girls. Think about how long one had to keep that secret. And the only thing you can do is either pathologize the other. It's all their fault because it certainly wasn't great granddad. Look how well he dresses. You understand what I'm saying? So when I say that this pathology goes hand in hand, I kid you not. Then you have science. And whenever we are in a process of trying to legitimize things, it's so amazing. You know, people always say this to me, even Black people, when they hear about post-traumatic. Because, you know, it's not correct unless you can count it and measure it, right? Science is the final. It is the number one. If you can say it's scientific, then you basically trump everything else, right? Science determines reality. So if we can scientifically assert a thing to be true, then in fact it is true because it's scientifically proven. It's a scientific fact. Matter of fact, that's what people will tell you when you try to say to them, I don't know if I agree with you. You know, it's scientific. It's a scientific fact, what I'm saying here, right? Which somehow makes it what? True. And it's also in a book. Now let's do the math. It's in a book and it's scientifically proven. Did anybody here realize that recently we lost a planet? Did anybody know what planet we lost? How you lose a planet? You know, I became fond of the little picture with we lost a planet. We didn't lose a planet. You know what it means? Science was wrong. Now, have they ever said, you know, we were wrong about that planet thing? No. It's called a paradigm shift. So let's go to science. And I think it's important that we do. So we go to someone named Carl von Linnaeus. Now, Carl von Linnaeus becomes an important character in this whole conspiracy of silence and legitimacy and removing the dissonance. Carl von Linnaeus developed a system based on a criterion of skin color and laid the basis for 19th century racial classification. Linnaeus properly began the science of anthropology. So here we have the father of anthropology. Although color classification of races dated back to the ancient Egyptians, anthropologists refer to Linnaeus's Systema Naturae of 1735 as the first modern study of man. While Linnaeus advanced classification with his use of a color criterion, he also fixed on his 4 families of man certain moral and intellectual peculiarities that continued into the 19th century anthropological vocabulary. He described Homo Americanus. Who might that be? That would be Native American. American Indians. Homo Americanus. And what did he say about them? He said they were reddish, choleric, obstinate, contented, and regulated by custom. Homo Europaeus, as white, fickle, sanguine, blue-eyed, gentle, and governed by laws. Homo anarchists, that'd be Asians, as sallow, grave, dignified, avaricious, and ruled by opinions, and Homo Afer as black, phlegmatic, cunning, lazy, lustful, careless, and governed by caprice. These insights into what Linnaeus defined as racial character, personality traits, behavior, intelligence, language, and a host of other related categories were transmitted into subsequent attempts at a science of classification and became more fixed than the races themselves. Not a shred of science here. But it is in a book. And it's touted as science. And what's more important, my students, I teach graduate students in social work. So the Dr. Leary, my God, we're looking at 1707 to 1778. We are, right? After all. But do you not hear these same attributions today? Those blacks, they're lazy, all of the exact same, am I telling the truth? In your newspapers, in your accounts of them, do you not hear these very same things? So does it matter that it started in 1707 and 1778 and has no scientific merit? That's multi-generational, is it not? It's being passed along. Part of the swallowing into the social gullet. Those are the beliefs, you see. So it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. And thank you, Carl von Linnaeus. Again, he's removing the cognitive what? Don't they deserve to be treated the way we treat them? Have we not just justified what we've done? After all, I just told you this is who they are. We're not wrong. We're just trying to keep the domestic tranquility.
She makes them feel uncomfortable.
I'm having a clicker thing. There we go. Johann Friedrich Blumenbach. Just look at him. He's not right. We can tell already. But he had to contribute his part as well. He says, now this man, Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, he was an individual. How many of you are familiar with the term Caucasian? Oh, yes. Then you know Johann. He does it in 5 races or varieties of man in the second edition of his work on the natural variety of mankind. His division into Caucasian, Mongolian, American, Ethiopian, and Malayan races, with the added Carl von Linnaeus descriptive peculiarities, became the subsequent basis of most 19th century anthropomedical studies. While Carl von Linnaeus founded his system principally upon skin color, Blumenbach considered a combination of color, hair, skull, and facial characteristics as fundamental means for classifying the 5 varieties of man. Central to his study was the Caucasian, a term which he originated. He took the name Caucasian, listen for the science, from Mount Caucasus because its southern slope had cradled what he felt to be the most beautiful race of men, the Georgian. The Caucasus near Mount Ararat, upon which the biblical ark came to rest after the flood, seemed the appropriate source for the original race of man. No science yet. Now I'm going to quote him. These are his words. For in the first place, the stock displays, as we have seen, the most beautiful form of the skull, from which is a mean and primeval type, the others diverge by most easy gradations on both sides the 2 ultimate extremes. That is, on the one side, the Mongolian, on the other, the Ethiopian. Besides, it is white in color. Anybody here ever met a skull that wasn't? Besides, it is white in color, which we may fairly assume to have been the primitive color of mankind. Zippity-doo-dah, no science, nothing to found this whole thing. He figured white skull, humanity began white. It's scary, but it's in a book, and it's touted as science, and we swallowed it without question.
Wow. Now, as we close, based off of her her words, because she's pretty much saying, some of the same points we're making. Literally, they put a science to it. And what's interesting is the very song we sing, which is Amazing Grace, the actual writer, what he thought about Black people. So on that note, I'm gonna let everybody get their points so we can close up for the night, because we could talk all night about the system, because the system got some more points we need to talk through.
Well, just shortly, yeah, like you said, I could talk all night about that. But the important thing that she mentioned was the science behind racism, the so-called science of racism, and it harkens back to the concept of religion and who's the authority. Who's the authority on how we should define our Christianity or whatever religion that we're going to express? So that, just like we said earlier, when Europeans came over here to the indigenous people, they claimed themselves to be the authority, that this is the right religion. We have a white Jesus. God is white. You should be worshiping him. Mm-hmm. And so we as Black people, we need to take back that authority. Take back that authority. And so this all ties into the concept of racism, that we were talking about, because of the fact that they're trying to not only colonize our religion, but they're trying to colonize our minds to be them, to be the authoritative worshiping Christian. That's all I have.
Wow. Who's next? Anybody? Just hop on in. Anybody got any closing statements?
I ditto Father G.
It's the same here, ditto. We look at stuff like this, but the answers, the how to resolve these things, how to reprogram one another to where we're creating prosperity, not dollars, but prosperity, of richness among us as a people. And because we know all the things that are going on, we know the effects of racism and colonization, and how we view church, and how we are contained, and we have gatekeepers that contain us in our biblical studies. And you have all these things that's there, but the resolution, how do you resolve the issues of having a mind of a person that has been colonized? How do you reprogram yourself or others to where it affects everyone as far as on the deliverance portion of it? Because we speak of deliverance in the sense of a sin or living in sin, but what happens with your mind when it's still locked in to a certain belief system? Not a belief, but a belief system. So how do you get yourself out of that mindset and get others out of that mindset, delivering one another? Because see, again, history shows us a lot of stuff biblically where Moses was able to lead, but he wasn't able to deliver. The mindset of the people, they had to die where they were, because a lot of them wasn't willing to cross over out of the mindset. So where do we go with the crossing over on the mindset? That's where we should be. How do we get there?
That's a great point. Great question, Brother Jeff. I'll say it like this, because you use Moses as an analogy. The Most High took Israel into the wilderness to detoxify them from Egypt. The problem was the people didn't want to let Egypt go. They wanted to keep running back to Egypt. So he said, I had to let those rebels die in the wilderness and take over a generation that didn't have the Egypt in them. We have to accept the fact that some of our people are going to have to die in the wilderness, and we're going to have to leave them there, because you can't cross Jordan carrying dead weight. And that's something that we don't want to hear, but it's necessary for our advancement and for us to go forward. Everybody is not going, where we need to go, because everybody don't want to go. The worst thing you can do when you in a pool and with another person who's drowning and you're trying to save them is to keep trying to save them while they're fighting against you, because then they will drown you too. And sometimes you got to let go, because if they don't calm down and allow themselves to float so you can bring them on in and they continue to flail and wail, you got to let them go, or you going down with them. The system has built castles in our minds. Dr. DeGruy was alluding basically to the science and things of this sort. When Europeans built castles on their neighbor's territory, they weren't moving the people of the land they were invading in. They were moving their own people in and setting up shop. And that's what a castle does. It's a fortified place. So they build a castle in our mind and put what they want into our brains, into our thinking. The only way you can remove a castle is you got to lay siege to it. You got to lay siege to it, and you got to get inside and you got to tear that thing down brick by brick, piece by piece. And so we have to lay siege to these castles that have been built within our minds and in our spirits by educating ourselves about these various things that we're discussing. We have to become disciplined, in order to get the education. And we have to expand our knowledge base, and then we have to take those things that we've learned and we have to pass them on to our people, and we got to learn how to close ranks. Everybody can't just walk up in here, and just think that they got a seat at the table when we've been sitting out back all this time. And that's the problem. We are so concerned about how everybody else feels and how everybody else thinks. And folks listening to this will think, oh, y'all not being godly people. Y'all not being good Bible believers or spiritual folks or Christians or whatever the case may be. But that's according to their paradigm, to how they're judging things. Look, I don't want to destroy the world and burn everything and everybody down. What I want the rest of the world to do is stop abusing me and my people, because they've been destroying us and burning us down. We have a right to exist and be here. The Most High put us here. And so we have a right to live in peace the same way they claim they fight for. You ever notice how people who take away everybody else's rights are the first ones to tell you about their rights? They always throw up their rights. We get a group and it's just us. The first thing happens is they come in your group and start telling you their right to be there. But we don't have a right to do this, that, or the other without them, because we allow everybody else to infringe on us, and then we make excuses and we create reasons as to why. We're afraid to do the hard work. So when somebody like me talks, oh, you preaching hate speech, that's skin doctrine. No, it's survival doctrine, because everybody else been doing that. Listen, Pan-Africanism, pro-blackness, all this stuff, there was pro-whiteness and pan-Europeanism before there were ever those concepts, because that's how they put us in chains and brought us across the Atlantic, because they had pro-whiteness and pan-Europeanism, and they expanded through those philosophies all across the world. We know them better as white supremacy. And yet we're afraid to call it what it is and confront it and then tell our people the hard truths. And so we continue to go around in circles, just like Israel did 40 years in the wilderness. And so at this point, we have to make up our own minds that, hey, listen, I want everybody to make it. I'm not preaching violence. I'm not preaching revenge and retaliation, but I am preaching stand up for yourself. Be a man, be a woman, close ranks, learn how to love and appreciate yourself. Speak out against the kind of things we see, like the feminization of our black men. Why every black man on TV now got to be gay, or he got to be excluded from a healthy family with a black woman. Look at this Marvel's movie that just came out. These are the subtle attacks that we keep being inflicted with and suffering from. We don't speak out and say enough about them because we've been conditioned, to believe that anytime we speak up for ourselves against these things, we're being racist, we're being hateful. And so you have to lay siege to the castles that's been built against you. They got to be torn down. And you can't be nice about it. I can't afford to care what my white friends or family members, I can't afford to care about their feelings. Because it's not personal against them. And so, it's just a matter of survival. Looking at the picture from a holistic viewpoint of what do I want for our people? And I don't have to hate nobody to love us or be violent against other folks to get for us what we rightfully deserve.
Mm-hmm.
In self-defense. And I'm going to continue to preach and teach that. But I just, we have to, you can't play nice with a wicked system that has no intention of being nice to you. It don't work. You go to dinner with them, they poison your plate.
Yep.
You have libations, they poison the drink. They give you the land, they coming back to take it later. It's too much history, there. And so we just got to tell the truth, man, about this stuff. And people don't want to hear that, but I'm tired of what folks don't want to hear. They're going to get this word, whether they want to hear it or not. Because I ain't on this earth to tell people what they want to hear. We're here to tell the truth. And I only got so much time to do that. And so we have to be resolved about going forward.
All right. So really enjoyed this. I had stepped away for a minute and ran, got something to drink, and heard we were Blacktastic's close. But I want us to come back again and continue on with this, because these two things correlate to something: mental illness in the Black community and how the church is handling it, and what are some of the triggers that's causing us to have some of this mental illness. These are things that all relate to each other, and people are missing it. But their biggest question is, why are they leaving the church? The bigger question is, what is going on with them to make them leave the church? What are they dealing with? What mental issues are? And it's not even mental issues, it's the trauma. The trauma ain't went anywhere, y'all. The trauma is still there. Some more in others than in some, and I'm just saying that across the board. Some may have less trauma than others, but the trauma is still there. And we know, it's spiritual warfare, but a part of that spiritual warfare is also you need a doctor to help you physically, as you would need a doctor to help you mentally. We can say I had a heart attack. Yes, God is going to heal me, but I still got to go to the doctor. I still got to go to the hospital. So with that being said, I don't want to be too long, but I do want to thank everybody for coming up here. Y'all, this ain't it. We're going to be doing more stuff, like I said, together. This is Sunday seminary or Friday seminary, Saturday seminary. When everybody got time, we're going to have these type of discussions. But I've enjoyed it, y'all. Thank y'all so much. And chat, thank y'all too. Y'all pass the words. Send this, share the link. If you haven't sub for the page, send the word out. We're gonna be doing more things like this. So y'all bless. Y'all have a wonderful Sabbath. And I will see you all later this weekend. All right. Good night.
Right, shalom.
So long.